Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us.
Anger over the tragic death of Henry Nowak as demonstrators in Southampton clashed with police.
There's growing scrutiny of the police, with bosses saying they will review anti-racism guidance in the wake of his murder.
Also today, Sky News investigates the alarming rise in women suffering injuries in childbirth.
And Dame Kelly Holmes will be here with us as well to talk about a common blood cancer that more than half of the public had never heard of.
Plus, is London ready for self-driving cars? We talked to US company Waymo about their plan to launch in the capital within months.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme. The tragic murder of 18-year-old Henry Nowak has captured the nation. The 18-year-old boy stabbed in Southampton and then handcuffed as he lay dying. And questions are now being asked about a potential two-tier policing system.
Well, last night there were protests near to where Henry was killed. Police were pelted with bottles and bricks. The Home Secretary condemned what she called the hijacking of the tragedy.
So look, you can see the clashes they're playing out between police and the protesters, forcing officers back from the line they've been holding. They had been organised after the release of police body camera footage on Monday, which showed Henry being handcuffed in the moments before his death.
Let's speak now to both of our correspondents covering this story. Oliver is here, as is Ali, to cover the political angle. Good morning to you both. Ollie, let's start with you. Just update us on what's happened overnight.
Well, we saw at about 5 o'clock yesterday evening outside Southampton Central Police Station, a few hundred protesters had gathered. They were there to listen to speeches by Tommy Robinson, also known as Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and Lawrence Fox. And then a short while afterwards, the protesters broke off and they headed towards the residential area near where Henry Nowak was stabbed to death. And it was at that point that the police were having to really hold their lines. They were wearing riot gear. They kept on getting pushed back and back and back. And we saw quite ugly scenes with bottles being thrown, bricks at one point, wheelie bins thrown towards police officers. Now, so far, we haven't heard of whether any arrests have been made, but we did hear earlier on Tuesday from Hampshire Police saying one of their officers had been misidentified online and had faced death threats and had to relocate for the safety of him and his family. So really what we saw was a sort of fever pitch amongst these protesters as things descended into those quite angry scenes that we saw on the streets of Southampton yesterday. And then separately on this issue of whether there is two-tier policing, which the government denies that there is, we've heard from the National Police Chiefs Council, their chairperson, saying that they're going to be reviewing the guidance in relation that they have. It's called the Race Action Plan. It's the anti-racism guidance that they've got. And they're reviewing to see whether the wording and phrasing of that is fit for purpose so that they can check that everything is equal in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on that with Ali, because there's the kind of policing dimension to this and the questions that are being asked of the police about, frankly, why they treated Henry like a criminal rather than as a victim at the scene. But I guess it also falls into the politics too, about whether that guidance, the framework in which the police are operating, I guess, is fit for purpose.
Yeah, that's right. And this morning, a source close to Home Secretary telling me that some of the wording in that guidance is clumsy. So, as you say, it's being looked at by this effectively a unit of police chiefs. And this is the guidance that was updated last year to the Race Action Plan. But, of course, that action plan came in as a result of decades of racial inequality in policing. There is obviously incredibly difficult questions that are being asked. And we know that the Prime Minister said, with spokesperson said to me yesterday, there's no such thing as two-tier policing. He said categorical, police must treat everyone equally, police must enforce the law without fear or favour. But he did say there are real questions about how the racism accusation informed the police response. But I think we are seeing a dividing line here between the Conservatives and Reform on one side, saying that there is such a thing as two-tier policing, and the Prime Minister saying there isn't.
Because I guess the thing is, if you look at the guidance, the Prime Minister says that there is equality in policing, but that is kind of the actual NPCC strategy, the anti-racism strategy says it does not mean treating everyone the same or being colour-blind, because it means responding to people in different ways depending on their racial
and I
needs.
think what they're saying is it's the wording, there needs to be more nuance, and that is what the source close to the Home Secretary is saying is clumsy.
And, Ollie, I guess central to what the IOPC, the police body, will be investigating is whether that guidance was central to the errors that the police made on the scene, and whether it stemmed from that and or just a grave error of judgment in the moment as well.
Yeah, so whether that guidance has then informed the officers in the actions that they took to believe the perpetrator instead of the victim, Henry Nowak, in this case. Because when they got to the scene, did they check him sufficiently when he said that he'd been stabbed 4 times, when he said that he couldn't breathe? Did they follow their own health and safety protocols? All of that will be looked at. But yes, I suppose one of the critical issues that they'll be looking at is whether the guidance that has come from these top police chiefs has then fed down and created this culture where officers believe that they have to take one side versus another side.
Let's talk a bit about the protest, shall we? Because, look, people are angry, obviously. And we've had Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, releasing a statement last night in response to that. She said this, in this camera, there can be no justification for hijacking this tragedy to stir up violence and disorder. Those responsible can expect to face the full force of the law. I thank the police who have tonight shown great bravery and calm in the face of disgraceful violence directed at them.
Are we playing something afterwards? No, that's it. It's interesting, you know, clearly everyone condemns violence entirely and always. It's interesting, this phrase of hijacking it, and I think we hold, you know, high-profile politicians to a different level. I mean, we don't have any numbers last night yet from the police, and we've tried to get it of if there were arrests or not. We don't have official numbers for how many people were there, but you said initially it was hundreds, not thousands. Well,
what we heard from Lawrence Fox was he estimated that there was 4,000 people there. What we understand from looking at the video is that it looks like it's in the hundreds, but we haven't got a grasp of firm numbers, and quite often when you go to police forces, they don't give you a firm number because they don't have counters who are there. On this issue of hijacking, you know, there are people there who've got legitimate concerns, and we've heard this time and time again from various reporting trips that we do around the UK. People will have genuine concerns, but I think from some of the locals, they are concerned that there have been people who've travelled from outside of the area, from the Southampton area, to come to this, to protest and bring their cameras and stream it live. So it's a very, very multifaceted issue. It's not really a black and white issue when you look at this. So it's very, very difficult to get a gist of the numbers. Who was there? Was it hijacked? Were these locals? It's not an easy thing to get a firm grasp of.
Thanks both very much indeed. Thank you.
Now, today on Sky News, so we'll be talking a lot about maternity care as our teams are spending 2 days inside Coventry Hospital, talking to families and healthcare workers about their experiences. An investigation by Sky News has found that across England, there's a rising number of women suffering injuries in childbirth.
It's something that, honestly, we probably don't talk about enough because of the nature of it, but it is pretty stark, the rise. Sky News has analysed NHS data, finding a 25% rise in women who experienced a 3rd or 4th degree tear in the last 5 years. Our health correspondent Laura Bundock spoke to one mum who suffered a 3rd degree tear about the lasting impact the injuries had on her life. Of course, this report includes descriptions of injuries suffered during childbirth.
Sometimes when I remember the feeling, I will, like, a physical shudder comes over my body.
We first met Megan, 36 weeks pregnant and preparing for her 2nd child. 3 years ago, she gave birth to her son, Roman. It was a low-risk pregnancy. That changed when she went into labour.
I can remember the feeling of the tear from my, from the start of the vagina all the way down to my perineum. And I remember the feeling of it actually ripping open and screaming. But the midwives didn't say anything. They didn't say stop, or they weren't coaching me.
Megan had suffered a 3rd-degree tear. They usually require surgical repair and follow-up care to restore continence. It's still relatively rare in childbirth, but is becoming more common. Around 1 in 35 women, or 2.9%, who gave birth in England in the last year had a 3rd or 4th degree tear, compared with 1 in 43, or 2.3% in 2021. That's an increase of 25%.
When I got back from the hospital and realised what I needed to do, I self-referred to the physio to try and get my pelvic floor back intact, which eventually I did, but it took months, like up to 9 months, to feel physically back to normal. I feel like I missed out on the newborn stage with my son because I was so sad and so traumatised and in so much pain.
The Chief Midwifery Officer for NHS England, Kate Brintworth, has told Sky News the NHS is taking action to transform care for pregnant women and their babies, including introducing new clinical standards to reduce avoidable harm, targeted support for services that need to improve, and work to tackle unacceptable inequalities in care and outcomes.
This is actually somebody's life. This is going to change somebody's life forever. They're going to remember this day forever. So it would be really nice just to be treated like a human.
Laura Bundock, Sky News.
If you've been affected by that story, do contact the Samaritans 116123 or visit samaritans.org.
I just want to, pay tribute to the women and the mums in particular who kind of reached out to this programme as well as during our coverage of maternity. We've read all your emails and it's really making us kind of sit up and determine even more to cover it as an issue. And with that in mind, tonight we've had a special edition of the UK Tonight on the state of maternity care. Sarah Jane Mee has been in University Hospital Coventry this week. Credits them for letting us in, and they will present the show live from there, 8 p.m. tonight. And do get in touch. If you want to share your maternity experience with us, email maternitystories@sky.uk.
Let's turn to the Middle East now. And again, the ceasefire is being tested as the US military says it's launched self-defence strikes on Iran and have shot down ballistic missiles and drones fired at ships and countries in the Gulf.
So US Central Command said strikes on the Qeshm Island and the Strait of Hormuz were a response to attempted attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait.
In Kuwait City, debris from an intercepted missile fell into a car park. The latest attack come amid stalled ceasefire negotiations after talks on a deal to end their months-long war failed to advance over the weekend.
Well, Sally Lockwood spoke to the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, about the dangers of strikes on nuclear facilities.
The Baraka nuclear power plant was hit here around 2.5 weeks ago, and you inspected the site yesterday. How much damage was there?
Well, it's considerable. It's considerable. This attack with a drone, quite a big one, I should say, impact an electrical facility which is close by to one of the reactors, Unit 3. I mean, as you know, there are 4 reactors there. So there was a hit, quite a big one, an explosion, and because of this, one of the lines was affected, and following the procedures in these cases, the unit was put and shut down, stopped.
We have seen these attacks take place during this war in Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran, Baraka here in the UAE. We've heard the threats from both sides about attacking critical energy infrastructure and power plants. Have we entered a dangerous moment in this war here in the Gulf where there could be one miscalculation which could lead to some sort of nuclear incident?
I would not disagree with that. We've seen how gradually this has gotten worse. At the beginning, what we saw was with the 12-day war, and then at the beginning of this new episode, there were threats. Then the Bushehr nuclear power plant was impacted. And then there was a lot of concern. And now this happens. So some people are asking themselves, well, what's next?
When you hear the threats coming from Washington, coming from Tehran, as head of the world's nuclear watchdog, you understand better than most what those consequences could be if those threats were followed through. What would be your message to the politicians in control of this war when you see these attacks on nuclear sites, which crosses an international red line? What would be your message to them?
Well, the message is that this benefits no one. No one. It's not only unconscionable, but it does not bring any military advantage. Radiological accidents are transboundary in nature.
And of course, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Absolutely, yes.
What are we talking?
Well, you know, in the case of a really radiological incident, we would be considering evacuations with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. And of course, socially speaking, you can imagine the impact, the panic, the socio-economical damage that would occur as a consequence of this. So we're not there, but we should take every measure, every step. We should, and this conversation is part of that. We should inform people of what the dangers that come associated with this are.
We're going to speak live to Sally in Abu Dhabi this morning for further detail. Of course, the ceasefire looking once again quite fragile. Oil prices up 1% or so, $97 on Brent off the back of it. Sally, join us live next hour.
Now, Vladimir Putin has been warned he can't afford to keep his war in Ukraine going at the current pace, with top officials telling the Kremlin to rein in the amount of money they're spending on defence.
Inside Russia, hundreds of thousands of small businesses have closed since the start of the year as the costs of the war mount. Our Russia correspondent, Ivor Bennett's in St. Petersburg, talking to people about the impact it's having on their lives.
Russia's economy is under pressure, and it shows. Closed cafes and shuttered shops are everywhere.
I'm in St. Petersburg on the main street, and all along here you see signs like this one. It means to let, and it's evidence of yet another business that has gone bust.
Across Russia, more than 200,000 small and medium-sized businesses closed their doors in the first 3 months of this year alone, as the cost of war in Ukraine piles up. Anastasia used to have 3 flower shops, but recently had to shut one because of growing costs and wilting demand.
Неприятно, очень больно и обидно.
It's unpleasant, very painful and frustrating. Right now, there are no growth opportunities, no opportunities. I can't imagine any such opportunity at all, not a single one. Our utility bills have tripled just to add to the absurdities. Honestly, you have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur in 2026.
In beauty salons too, things are far from pretty. A rise in VAT to help fund Russia's war has increased tax bills by as much as 80 times, and many can't survive. The industry predicts a third of its businesses will fold by the end of the year.
I survived the 2008 crisis, 2014, the pandemic, the beginning of mobilisation, the beginning of the special military operation, and I can say that there's never been a crisis like this. This is the most difficult period for Russian entrepreneurs, the most difficult.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine had previously helped grow its economy. Massive military spending outweighed the impact of Western sanctions. But after more than 4 years, it's getting harder to afford. Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries are hitting the Kremlin's war chest, and the economy has begun to contract. The spike in oil prices due to war in the Middle East has given Moscow a boost, but experts warn it's not enough.
Russian economy is like a climber who's stuck above 8,000 meters. It is the altitude which mountaineers call the death zone. At this height, the human body cannot survive for long. It consumes itself faster than it can recover. And what we see with the war at the Gulf is that it provided Russian budget additional funding, additional oxygen, but it wasn't a game changer. So it's not brought this mountaineer from the death zone to the safe space.
And it's not just businesses seeking salvation, consumers are too.
The prices for eggs, milk, meat, pasta, bread, everything has gone up.
Feels like it's been 10 to 15% over the past half a year.
Naturally, we'd like things to get cheaper. In general, as my grandmother used to say, I wish the war would end soon.
The government argues the slowdown is to be expected and supposedly normal after a period of high growth. But there isn't much about Russia's economy that is normal anymore, and its problems are becoming difficult to ignore. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, St. Petersburg.
Well, we're talking, of course, on the programme about the death of Henry Nowak, stabbed, then handcuffed, as he said that he had been stabbed, as he told police officers that he couldn't breathe. And there are sometimes crimes that happen and things that happen that are so awful that it sparks a desire for a response, a change. And I think this is one of those moments. I'm glad to say that we can talk now to Sarah Jones, the Minister of State for Policing and Crime. It's great to have you on the programme today. There's a lot to discuss. First, I just wanted to start on the protest that we saw last night. Can you just confirm how many people were arrested?
So 2 people so far have been arrested. 1, as I understand it, for assaulting a police officer, 1 for possession of a weapon. The police will be looking at the footage from social media, from the drones that they had, and they will be considering whether there will be more arrests at a later stage.
The Home Secretary said that the tragedy had been hijacked. Do you agree? Or do you think it's legitimate that people feel angry?
I think when I viewed the footage, as most people have, you feel a mixture of sadness that then turns to anger and confusion and upset and lots of very powerful emotions. I think we have to take our lead from the family, who have been so extraordinary in the language that they have used and the way that they have behaved, and they have said they do not want this to stir up more hatred and tension, and I think we need to respect that and try and take the anger and the upset and allow justice to take its course, and to put that to the use that the family have asked us to, which is to do more to tackle the epidemic of knife crime and to make sure his death results in some changes for the better.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about the lessons, I think. And look, you've obviously watched the video. I've watched the video. It's something that kind of stays with you. You know, he was treated as a criminal, not a victim, as he was dying, right? The last words he heard were his rights being read out to him. Do you think he was treated in that way because he was an 18-year-old white boy who'd been accused of racism?
I don't know, and we need to get to the bottom of what happened, and the IOPC need to do their investigation, be allowed to do their investigation. There is a large package of body-worn video footage that they will be looking at. There will be conversations and interviews they need to be doing with all of the police who were there, with the family, with everybody, to get the proper picture. The police must treat everybody equally under the law. We need to make sure that that happens. I think in the vast majority of cases that does happen. Where it doesn't, you're right, this is one of those moments where the country is saying this feels very wrong, something needs to happen, but we must let the investigation happen to get to the bottom of it and to understand, so that we can learn the right lessons.
I was interested you say that the law says that everyone should be treated equally, and I think that's why there's been such a focus on the anti-racism strategy, the 2025 anti-racism strategy from the National Police Chiefs Council. I just want to read it because it is quite important to get a glimpse of what it said. Producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups by responding to individuals and communities according to their specific needs, circumstances and experiences. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Because I guess that feels like it's saying it's OK to not treat everyone equally.
Yeah, and I think it's clumsy, and I think it's right that they're reviewing it.
Is it clumsy or is it wrong? Because, I mean, you can say something clumsily or you can say something that is wrong. And I think some people would say the principle there is wrong.
I think it's right that the NPCC are looking at it.
What's
and
your own view
just
as
to qualify what I think as policing minister, there is a wider piece of work called the Race Action Plan, which was put together under the previous government, which is about how do we train officers, how do we make sure everybody is mindful of the fact that there has been a history of racism in policing that we all know is well documented, and that needs to be addressed. This is quite a small sort of values document, sort of summary, and I think it's not written in the way that it should be, and it's right that it should be reviewed. But I think that shouldn't be taken to mean we need to rip up the whole system. Yeah. We don't, but I think this document is wrong.
You think this document is wrong?
I think that...
Not just clumsy, it's wrong. OK. Just, can you talk me through your conversations with the police in recent days? You must have spoken to Hampshire Police.
Yes, I spoke to the Chief Constable yesterday and to the Police and Crime Commissioner, actually. They are... doing their job. I think there was a particular concern that one of the police officers has been misidentified as being something to do with the case when they're nothing to do with the case, and they've actually had to move house with their family, relocate so that they can get away from potential death threats that they've been receiving. So that's another reason why we need to be really cautious. I should also thank the police for their policing last night. Very difficult circumstances. Of course, people have the right to protest, but some of those protesters were unacceptable in their behaviour. It was a difficult and very tense situation for all those police to have to navigate when they are also dealing with their day-to-day job and the response and all the investigations that they will be doing. So I think we should thank them for what they're doing.
Can I ask if you have sympathy for the police who were there at the scene, the ones who dealt with Henry?
As we know, we don't know the full picture. What we do know is there's 100,000 calls to 999 every day. The police have to respond. I've been in multiple response cars where you hear on the radio what's happening, you go, you do what you can, you have to use your best judgment, you have to use your training, and it's a difficult job. It is a scary, difficult job to do, and we should all be grateful to our police. And as I said, in the main, I think everybody gets it pretty much right in pretty difficult circumstances. But, you know, if there are things to learn here, we need to learn them. But we need to get to the bottom of what happened.
Nigel Farage says there's a cultural problem, that there is white people are not treated equally. Do you think he's right?
I don't think the evidence at the moment would suggest that. If you look at the facts and figures about policing, I will always listen to the police in terms of what they're saying. And the Home Secretary said yesterday, you know, we need to talk to the police, we need to talk to the Sikh community, we need to talk to knife crime campaigners, we need to understand what it is we need to do differently and better, and we will do that. The message from Henry's family that is so powerful is don't let this, you know, this awful death should lead to something better. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. That's what the Home Secretary is focused on.
You mentioned there about knife crime. Vikram Digworth stabbed Henry 5 times with a 21 centimetres, I think it is, Sikh ceremonial blade. Should it have been legal for him to carry that weapon?
So at the moment, it's a 2019 piece of legislation that came in that basically says if you are carrying certain weapon, you have a defence under the law, which is religious. It doesn't name the Kirpan in legislation, but religious purposes, work purposes. You know, if you're going to work and you have to carry a weapon of some kind, then that's a defence under the law. What the Home Secretary said yesterday is that carrying a weapon for religious purposes is one thing, using it is a completely different thing. And the man who murdered Henry Nowak is in prison now for decades, and that is totally right. There is a question, and there will be questions when we know more about him and his history and a number of weapons that were in his home, and we are looking at this more broadly, because it is very disturbing that we are seeing an increase of people who are fixated with violence, who are sort of obsessed with violence and gathering weapons, and we are changing the law to try and tackle that. So the law has just been passed, so if you buy bulk knives, the seller has to tell the police. There are various different pieces of legislation that we're putting in place, but we need to look at these things. And what the Home Secretary said is, let's talk to the Sikh community, let's talk to knife crime campaigners, and let's see what more we can do.
You make the distinction, and I understand it, between carrying a weapon and using a weapon, but you will know in your work with young people and knife crime that even if you're carrying a weapon, as many people think that they're carrying it for defence, if you carry a weapon, you're more likely to use it, right?
You are, yeah.
So
then you're more likely to be hurt yourself, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess my question again is, should it be legal for someone to carry a 21-centimetre blade?
If it's for work purposes, there might be a reason, and for religious purposes, that is the law as it stands. We need to have conversations about these things always. We're always thinking of new bits of legislation we can do to try and stop people using knife. We've just introduced a new offence of knife possession with intent, which carries a maximum sentence of 7 years. So that's a new piece of legislation we've brought in. But we will keep looking at these things. Knife crime is a scourge in our society. We've committed to halve it in a decade.
OK, it's been really good to have you on the programme. Thank you very much, Sarah James, speaking to us there. We'll continue with coverage, of course, of the Henry Nowak case. Coming up as well, we'll be talking to the son of a couple who have been imprisoned in Iran as their appeal is refused.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking, thank you so much, trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Thanks for being with us again. It's a tough listen, to watch what we're going to talk about next, but I urge you not to go away, because it is really, really important that we talk about this openly, which, frankly, we haven't done for too long. Because the major Sky News investigation into the rising number of children suffering injuries during childbirth has found a 25% increase in women who experienced a 3rd or 4th degree tear in the last 5 years.
Here with us now is Theo Clark, former MP, who chaired the birth trauma inquiry and experienced it herself. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. You've experienced this, as you've been very open about in the past. If you don't mind, just tell us about the trauma, as we use that word, that it caused.
Well, firstly, I'm so shocked to hear those statistics. And unfortunately, Sophie, I'm one of them. I had my baby in the last 5 years and suffered from a 3rd degree tear. And firstly, no one had explained to me what a birth injury was. I didn't really understand about risks in childbirth. And a 3rd degree tear is a very significant birth injury. It basically means that, in effect, my baby kind of ripped me open when she came out during a vaginal delivery. And unfortunately, that meant that I went on to suffer from issues with incontinence after the birth. And really, I've had several years now of recovery post the birth, and really life will never go back to the way that it was before. And it was excruciatingly painful. I ended up being rushed into emergency surgery, having suffered from a postpartum hemorrhage. I lost a lot of blood, and I was awake in the operating table for over 2 hours being stitched up from this very significant tear. And it was an absolutely terrifying experience, and something I wouldn't wish on anyone, which is why I'm here today, still campaigning for the government to address it, because it was excruciatingly painful, and it's been a long road to recovery. And unfortunately, my body will never return to how it was before the birth, which is certainly something I was not aware of when I first had my daughter.
Thank you, by the way, for talking about this so openly. I think it's really important. I think it's so important. It's one of these things that we, like you say, you kind of go into these things without having an open conversation. And I think that leads to some of the issues that we see then, because you kind of going in blind in a way. What would you like to see change?
Well, firstly, I mean, the government has this current maternity investigation. But my question has always been, the government's been in power now for now 2 years. There are so many recommendations in the birth trauma inquiry report that I chaired in Parliament 2 years ago, which have been sat on the shelf waiting for the new Health Secretary to bring it in. And that's also why I've been campaigning for a maternity commissioner, because I really think we've got to have now an independent expert in government whose job it is day to day to be fighting for mums and implementing all these reforms in the NHS. And I started this debate a few months ago for a petition with Louise Thompson, who's another mum who was affected by a very traumatic birth. We had 157,000 members of the public who signed our petition, actually triggered a debate in Parliament in the last few weeks. And we also met with the previous Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. And I think it illustrates the point so well that the Health Secretary has just changed in the last few weeks. And I'm now, I think, on my 8th or 9th Health Secretary since I've been talking about this. So I really think that enough is enough, and we don't have the dedicated leadership in the political sphere to be talking and driving the action. We need to have more money, we need to have more investment in women's health, but we also need the political leadership of someone who actually cares and is gripping this day to day.
Just want to come back to the statistics, because, I mean, you were shocked by them. How do you think it's possible that they've been rising?
Well, first of all, isn't that shocking? I mean, the UK is a developed G7 country, and the fact that these statistics are getting worse, not better, is very telling, I think, about the state of maternity services. I find it deeply distressing when women write to me almost every day, sharing examples of poor care, unfortunately, in maternity care. And we found that in the birth trauma inquiry, when I heard from 1,300 families that wrote to us and shared evidence. I think partly it's a discussion about the culture within the NHS. I heard the mum on your previous report talking about her experience of her 3rd degree tear. And she talked about how the midwife didn't support the baby to come out, and basically were completely focused, I think, on the baby arriving and not thinking about the mum. And really, that's been the whole point of my campaign, is that I do feel that in this country we focus on the pregnant mum and the newborn baby, but not the mum post-birth who's had potentially a really difficult time. And I think we haven't had that really frank conversation in the NHS about culture and training. And I do think we need to work much better together and kind of break the silos and trust. And kind of the key thing that I learned from chairing the birth trauma inquiry was that there's very sadly still a postcode lottery in the UK in maternity care. So depending on where you currently give birth, you will actually receive a different level of care. And that's something that I wrote to the previous Prime Minister and asked them to address by launching a national maternity strategy. And I find it quite frankly outrageous that the current government hasn't implemented that when they've had every opportunity to do so. And I really hope that Baroness Amos includes these recommendations in her report at the end of the month. And also we have Donna Ockenden with her major report into Nottingham University Hospitals Trust as well in the next few weeks. So a really big moment this month in June for maternity care, and I think the government needs to urgently grip it to look after mums like myself and so many others who have unfortunately been harmed.
Yeah, I think the culture thing is so important, and it's actually the kind of way people have been treated. I mean, I've had such an overwhelming number of people write into me, and the one that really gets me is, baby loss, which, I'm sure some people watching will have experienced as well, but also the kind of small cruelties that happen afterwards that make people's experience so much worse. There was one email that came in this week that has really, really stayed with me, and I hope I can do a bit more on about how this woman was treated after, a stillbirth. It's just unbelievable. Do you feel like it's a priority for Keir Starmer?
Well, the honest answer is I don't think the government has prioritised maternity care. On my podcast, Breaking the Taboo, every week I speak to mothers who've had a difficult experience in maternity care. And unfortunately, I've heard many stories, Sophie, like what you've just described. And I think partly it's about funding and the lack of political prioritisation by the government. But also, as I said, it's also about training and the language that we use with patients. Some of the examples I hear don't actually require more funding from the government. They actually require just more compassionate care. So things like being offered a glass of water and being put in the bed next to you, not 6 metres away when you've had a caesarean and you can't get up and walk because you've had abdominal surgery, or some of the horrific language that we've heard in the last few days of mothers basically being told, don't come in, you're being a nuisance to the service, and then they don't come in and their baby sadly passes away. That, quite frankly, is unacceptable language. And that's more, I think, about culture and compassion than it is about finance. But I do think the Health Secretary, he's in only his first couple of weeks in the job. I'm really pleased that he did chair the first meeting of the maternity task force in the last few weeks. But quite frankly, this is a huge brief on his desk, and I really hope that this becomes his top priority.
Theo Clark, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And a reminder, a special programme tonight, 8 p.m. Sarah Jane Me hosting it from Coventry Hospital. Now, a British couple being held in prison in Iran have lost their appeal against a 10-year sentence after being found guilty of espionage. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were detained in January last year. They'd entered the country on an around-the-world motorcycle trip. We can speak now to Lindsay's son, Joe Bennett. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. You must be obviously devastated that they lost their appeal. I wonder if I also may add, perhaps not that surprised, alas?
Yeah, I think, as I've said, this is all part of what I believe to be the theatre that the Iranians play. We've seen this happen multiple times. You do wish that justice prevails, but unfortunately we're now in a position where the appeal through the Revolutionary Court was unsuccessful, and it's now being progressed to the Iranian Supreme Court. The trouble we've got is that the whole experience has been very opaque throughout. We're not able to understand what was said before, but we also don't know, how this progresses forward now.
And tell us, you said opaque about the process. What's your contact been like with your mum and stepfather of late? How are they doing? Do you know?
So we've had very sporadic conversations, but recently we haven't been able to speak to them at all. We're relying on sort of third-party communications, that be their lawyer or family members of other detainees, to get the information. Craig's nearing 4 weeks of hunger strike at the moment, and that's one of the hardest things for us as a family, is not being able to speak to him or my mum in such dire times. So having to be reliant on others is a struggle. But what we have seen is the UK Embassy return recently, and we're hoping top of the list really has to be getting in and seeing them. They haven't been seen in almost 6 months now, and I think with what's going on, that is top priority for us as a family, to make sure that they're both physically and mentally okay.
Do you think the government here, the embassy there, do you think they're doing all that they can?
You're stuck in a rock and a hard place when I get asked that question, because you hope that behind closed doors that these conversations are happening, and it's not lost on the family that the situation in Iran is extremely difficult to navigate. That I understand. But it's actually interesting. The guest you had on previously, talked about language. And I think that's another thing that strikes me is the Foreign Office seem to use quite defeatist language, especially when they last spoke to my mum. And I think that's something that inherently needs to change. We have to start to use different language when approaching these situations. Now, what we have to see is this not being just treated as a consular and welfare case anymore, because it's not. We're so far past that, especially now with the appeal being rejected. I think there has to be more action and solidarity with the Foreign Office moving forward.
Joe, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No problem, thank you.
Joe Bennett, son of Lindsay Forum there. Now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about blood cancer and how a huge portion of the public can't identify the issues around quite a common type of it. We'll be right back.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to in the Rose Garden, in the East Wing?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter. Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. A new study has highlighted a significant gap in public awareness of one of the most common blood cancers. Multiple myeloma affects more than 33,000 people across the UK.
But more than half of people surveyed had never even heard of it, and just 1 in 5 people correctly recognised it as a form of blood cancer. Let's speak now to Dame Kelly Holmes, multiple myeloma campaigner and, of course, former Olympic champion. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tell us about multiple myeloma and why you're a campaigner for it.
Well, it is, as you said, the 3rd most common blood cancer. but the signs and the symptoms are very vague because they're things that we could have all the time, like fatigue, bone pain, common infections and colds. So these are things that we go around with but don't necessarily recognise the fact that it could be something more underlying really. And that's why I've joined forces with J&J to launch the Get Ahead of Myeloma campaign, because the thing is, if we know that there's awareness needed to happen in our day-to-day lives, you're likely to go and get checked. If you don't hear about this sort of thing, you wouldn't. My mother had it, and my mum unfortunately passed away in 2017. And what was really, one, scary, but two, so kind of the lack of awareness, understanding, is that my mum worked for the NHS for many, many years. She worked at a hospital for many, many years. And me being an athlete, thought that some of her symptoms were an achy back. You know, I'd give her a massage on the floor and think, you know, she gets complaining of her back, her lower back and her hips. And then what was happening was that she fell and she broke her arm. And again, it was just with the dog, so we just thought, oh, normal. And then she had bad pain in her rib cage, and we found out she'd broken a rib. Yeah. So all these sort of symptoms were coming up, and we're just like, this isn't right. It's just gone on too long. And anyway, it was fortunate that she went and had a blood test, and the result was that she had multiple myeloma. And we were just, as a family, were just like, what is that? You know, because you have no idea. And it basically is, it weakens the bone and the immune system. So the white blood cell count's obviously a lot higher, but it weakens bones. And it's within the bone marrow. So, of course, how do they test it? Because if you just have a normal blood test, it's not going to show that up. But once you've seen these ongoing symptoms, they're going to do further tests, and then it's going to come out.
But like you say, these are not things that you would necessarily flag. You know,
no.
Being tired, being achy, this is part of life, particularly as you get a bit older as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it used to be 65 and over was the common sort of age. My mum was 62 when she got diagnosed, but they say that you might have it for many years before that. But actually, one of the surveys is saying that 18 to 29 is becoming a age where it's getting diagnosed, which they don't know why, of course. And obviously with the younger generation, there's so many other factors that might be there. But the fact that it could happen to anybody, you know, they also say that 2 to 3 times likely to happen in black people when my mother was white. Yeah. You know, so actually, I think it's about those signs. You know, you're not going to go through a red light because it's a warning not to do it. So if you're seeing warnings in your body, why aren't you going to go and get that checked?
And just what are the core warning signs that people should look out for? It's
fatigue,
yeah,
body pains, and recurring infections. They are so vague, and that's the thing, because we all go around, and not being funny, women, and I, as a particular age, through the menopause, I have had body pains galore. Now, even with my mother having passed away, I wouldn't think, oh, I need to go and get a test there. But actually, in my head now, it's like, why wouldn't I test for anything?
Go and do it after this.
Yeah, go and do it. And it's an incurable cancer. So this is what people need to know. It's incurable, but it's treatable. But it's only going to be treatable, and you're only going to survive it if you get early diagnosis.
Talk to me about your mum. I love seeing those pictures of you with her.
Oh.
You said that what did she do in the NHS?
So she basically worked within the X-ray department for many years. She was in 2 hospitals. She loved it, and while she was diagnosed, she basically was lucky enough to have one of the surgeons come and speak to her about it, but she loved her job.
And I guess she was very supportive of you and your own, like, athletic career, right?
Yeah, she was so proud. I mean, she had me when she was 17, so she was a young mum. You have all those highs and lows of being so close. But she was so proud of me, you know, without a doubt. And I hope that she's as proud, or if not proud of me, for doing something that's so meaningful to so many families, but also in her memory, really, because I didn't know about it. It's affected our family. I've seen the effects it has on other families, the patients and those around, and I want people just to be aware of those common things and just go and get tested. And actually, can I just say, there is because Myeloma Awareness Week's coming up, but if people are thinking they've got symptoms, if you go on myeloma.org.uk/warning, there's a useful symptom translator that you can discuss with your doctor. So once you see all those symptoms, you can actually take that to the doctor and say, I've got these, could you test maybe for myeloma?
No, definitely, really, really important to flag that. And by the way, your mum, I have no doubt, would have been immensely proud of you, because the whole nation is and was. I still remember that, an epic double gold in Athens. And I hope you don't mind, I just wanted to ask, in light of, you know, it's not the Olympics coming up, the World Cup coming up, just the way that you managed to deal with the... Because we're so proud of you because we put so much pressure on you.
Yeah, we did, we did.
And then you delivered. What's your tip to the England team? There's a lot of hope and expectation of how you deal with that weight of expectation.
I suppose the noise externally isn't as big as the noise internally. And I think for people, you know, like the England team and that, they have to get rid of that expectation because the pressure becomes too much. You do things that you wouldn't normally do. You make mistakes that aren't something that you've done in training or the normality. So I think as much as it's, you know, feels difficult as an individual performing, you know, the expectation that's put on side, that can't help you. You know what I mean? Those people willing you to do well obviously heightens up that kind of belief mechanism, that team effect, that, yeah, we can do this. But actually, you know, the professional athletes have got to get it right at the right time. You've got to remember that you're not the only people that are playing, you're not the only person trying to go for gold. Everyone else around it is. Yeah. And so you've got to stick with the professional mindset of we've got to be our best. We've still got the Commonwealth Games this year, we've got the European Champs, there's so much sport happening. We all want our countries to win, don't we?
Yeah. And apologies, because me and Wilf were definitely some of those people putting the pressure, external pressure.
I'm definitely the worst offender on that. Worst offender. Dame Kelly Holmes, a real pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you here with us.
Lovely to speak to Kelly Holmes. Lots more coming up in just a few moments' time. Don't go anywhere. We'll bring you the rest of the day news in just a couple of moments.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Bridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Will, a very good morning from me as well.
Anger over the tragic death of Henry Nowak as demonstrators in Southampton clash with police.
There's growing scrutiny of the police and calls to review anti-racism guidance in the wake of his murder.
The US military launches strikes on Iran as Iranian ballistic missiles and drones are shot down over countries in the Gulf.
And Sky News investigates the alarming rise in women suffering serious injuries during childbirth.
Plus, could a bumblebee replace Winston Churchill? Can we look at plans for new designs on our banknotes?
A very good morning to you and welcome to the programme. Well, the tragic murder of the 18-year-old Henry Nowak has captured the nation. The 18-year-old boy stabbed in Southampton and handcuffed as he lay dying. Questions are being asked about potential two-tier policing system in the UK.
Last night there were angry protests near to where Henry was killed. Police were pelted with bottles and bricks. The Home Secretary condemned what she called the hijacking of a tragedy. And this morning, the policing minister told us that 2 people were arrested.
Take a look at some of these pictures. You can see the clashes between police and protesters, forcing officers back from the line they'd been holding. More than 1,000 people were at the protests, which were organised following the release of police body camera footage on Monday that showed police handcuffing Henry in the moments before his death.
Now, when a crime like this happens, questions are asked and people try and work out what lessons need to be learned. And one of them is around the policing and the reaction by the police in the immediate aftermath of the stabbing. And one of the particular things is the police anti-racism guidance, the action plan that officers follow. This morning, police chiefs have said they were reviewing the language in it.
This is an extract from it. It says, producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups by responding to individuals and communities according to their specific needs, circumstances and experiences, with understanding that these will be racialised and with the aim of reducing harm. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind.
Well, I put that to Sarah Jones, the Policing and Crime Minister. This is what she had to say.
There is a wider piece of work called the Race Action Plan, which was put together under the previous government, which is about how do we train officers, how do we make sure everybody is mindful of the fact that there has been a history of racism in policing that we all know is well documented, and that needs to be addressed. This is quite a small sort of values document, a sort of summary, and I think it's not written in the way that it should be, and it's right that it should be reviewed. But I think that shouldn't be taken to mean we need to rip up the whole system. Yeah. We don't, but I think this document is wrong.
Well, Ollie and Ali are both here, so we can discuss this a bit further. Ollie, just come to you first of all. Bring us up to speed on the scale of the protests last night.
So an estimated 1,000 to 1,500 people attended these protests last night. What started off as peaceful speeches that were being held outside of Southampton Central Police Station. We saw there Tommy Robinson, also known as Stephen Axie Lennon, along with the actor turned activist Lawrence Fox. Those protesters then moved from the Central Police Station to the area where Henry Nowak was stabbed to death, and it was at that point that there were skirmishes with the police. We saw bottles being thrown, at one point a wheelie bin thrown at police officers who repeatedly had to withdraw from their lines. They weren't able to hold the lines because there were so many people who were there. Quite tense scenes that we could see unfolding on our screen at the moment. And the Policing Minister, Sarah Jones, confirmed this morning that 2 people were arrested, 1 for assault, 1 for carrying an offensive weapon, with the warning that there could be further arrests to come as the police trawl through the CCTV and the drone footage that they have from this incident.
Ali, I just wanted to kind of sort of zoom out as well, because there are so many things that have been thrown up by this, and we just heard Sarah Jones there talking about the language in this police guidance. She said it was wrong. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was really stark because this morning, source close to Home Secretary saying it was clumsy. That was the word that she initially used. You pushed her, and then eventually she did say that it was wrong. I think it's really important to be really clear about what we're talking about. This is it. It's 5 or 6 pages long, and it is guidance that adds to this, which is the big race action plan. Which obviously responded to, you know, decades of racism in the police. But she has said the wording is wrong. I mean, you read it out there. So obviously that is something the government is going to be looking at. But it's a massive test for the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to try to do this in a nuanced, balanced way to, you know, address the problems, but without stoking up something bigger.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, seeing the two documents is quite informative, isn't it? Like, this is the kind of the guidance alongside the main piece. If that
and
makes
she
sense.
said we shouldn't rip up this main piece of work for this smaller piece of work.
I guess the other pressure on politicians is that they're being pressed, understandably, for what they think on this. Before, Ollie, we've had the IOPC investigation, and I guess central to the IOPC, this is the Independent Office for the Police, investigation will be whether that guidance that the policing minister said the wording of was wrong is the central reason why Henry was so appallingly treated by police on the scene.
Yeah, whether those officers who were responding took the words as verbatim, that it doesn't mean that everybody's treated equally, instead listening to the perpetrator and that claim that he was racially abused and giving that more prominence than the person who said that he'd been stabbed 9 times and said that he couldn't breathe repeatedly. And that is where a lot of the pain and hurt has come for the family, because they certainly believe that the police have got more questions to answer. That IOPC investigation, though, could potentially take quite a bit of time. They are speaking to the 4 officers who were involved, and we learned yesterday one of those officers has since resigned, 3 of them remaining with Hampshire Police at the minute.
It's really so difficult for the Home Secretary, for the Prime Minister. I thought the Policing Minister, Sarah Jones, did pretty well in that seat earlier to comment when we don't have the results of these things. At the same time, there's a bit of a vacuum from the Prime Minister at the moment. I mean, he did make a statement last night.
He was accused of not speaking quickly enough, but of course, you know, there was an ongoing court investigation.
Oh, I think we've been very clear about that, by the way. Obviously, the reason in past weeks why legitimately nothing has been said is the court case.
Including by us.
Exactly.
Exactly. The court case obviously had to finish, and it's right, by the way, because you could prejudice the investigation and the perpetrator could get off if you get it wrong. But I mean, time moves quickly, but in the last 24 hours, I guess it's just an open question, like, will we be hearing more, specifically from the PM, in more detail on this, which I think it's fair to say there hasn't been much detail yet.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to come up, I would imagine, at Prime Minister's questions. So I think we will hear about it in that context. He's going to continue to be asked about it, as will the Home Secretary. I should actually just read you a statement from the Home Secretary. She said, there can be no justification for hijacking this tragedy to stir up violence and disorder. Those responsible can expect to face the full force of the law. I thank the police who have tonight shown great bravery and calm in the face of disgraceful violence directed at them. I think, you know, you could draw the parallel that she is talking there about Nigel Farage, which we also saw Kemi Badenoch saying that things shouldn't be whipped up. These were the words by Nigel Farage, people asking people to react with pure, cold rage, which many are saying, you know, is that incitement? I should say, you know, Nigel Farage has gone out of his way to distance himself from Tommy Robinson, who led these protests. I think there is a big challenge for Reform here to show that they are being balanced, but people I've spoken to in Reform see this as an opportunity for them and a dividing line for them.
Ali, thank you very much, and Oliver, thank you too. And now today on Sky News, we're going to be talking a lot about maternity care. It's something that we think is very important. We're not going to be shying away from it. Our teams are spending 2 days inside Coventry Hospital talking to families and healthcare workers about their experiences. And it comes as an investigation by Sky News has found that across England, there's a rising number of women suffering injuries in childbirth.
Sky News has analysed NHS data, finding a 25% rise in women who experienced a 3rd or 4th degree tear in the past 5 years. Our health correspondent, Laura Bunduck, spoke to one mother who suffered a 3rd degree tear about the lasting impact the injury has had on her life. A warning, this report describes injuries suffered during childbirth.
Sometimes when I remember the feeling, I will, like, a physical shudder comes over my body.
We first met Megan 36 weeks pregnant and preparing for her second child. 3 years ago, she gave birth to her son, Roman. It was a low-risk pregnancy. That changed when she went into labour.
I can remember the feeling of the tear from from the start of the vagina all the way down to my perineum. And I remember the feeling of it actually ripping open and screaming. But the midwives didn't say anything. They didn't say stop, or they weren't coaching me.
Megan had suffered a third-degree tear. They usually require surgical repair and follow-up care to restore continence. It's still relatively rare in childbirth, but is becoming more common. Around 1 in 35 women, or 2.9%, who gave birth in England in the last year had a third or fourth degree tear, compared with 1 in 43, or 2.3% in 2021. That's an increase of 25%.
When I got back from the hospital and realised what I needed to do, I self-referred to the physio to try and get my pelvic floor back intact, which eventually I did, but it took months, like up to 9 months, to feel physically back to normal. I feel like I missed out on the newborn stage with my son because I was so sad and so traumatised and in so much pain.
The Chief Midwifery Officer for NHS England, Kate Brintworth, has told Sky News the NHS is taking action to transform care for pregnant women and their babies, including introducing new clinical standards to reduce avoidable harm, targeted support for services that need to improve, and work to tackle unacceptable inequalities in care and outcomes.
This is actually somebody's life. This is going to change somebody's life forever. They're going to remember this day forever. So it would be really nice just to be treated like a human.
Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Let's talk now to our health correspondent, Laura Bundock. Laura, can I just say I'm so glad we're doing this. I'm really, really so glad we're doing this. I'm so glad we're talking openly about birth injuries. I'm so glad you're talking to us here from the hospital. What should we be expecting later?
Well, hello, good morning from University Hospital, Coventry. We're going to be live here all day, given this really rare access to all aspects of the service here, which will hopefully give us a snapshot of what life is really like on maternity wards. We'll be speaking to staff at every level and also the expectant and new parents they're caring for. And as we know, this could not come at a more important time. Maternity services are currently under national review following a series of scandals and damning reports. We know that for too long, too many families have been failed within the maternity system. Now, here at Coventry, it's a big unit. 5,000 babies are born here every year, and it takes a very diverse population. It's a specialist centre taking some of the most complex, difficult cases. It is also, unlike many maternity units, doing well at the moment. It was rated good in its last inspection report, but there is always room for improvement. We know that staffing levels here are a challenge, like the wider NHS, as is the recruitment and retention of staff. And we know how much staff matters to people. The Sky News data and forensics team analysed over 370,000 online conversations about maternity, and staff was the most discussed topic. 37% of those conversations were about staff. So hopefully today we will be hearing from and speaking to the staff here, finding out what those challenges are and what they're doing to try and resolve them. They've already had a very busy morning here. I can tell you that as of now, 3 babies have been born here, with another due imminently. So we'll be finding out more as we are live here in Coventry all day.
Laura, we look forward to the coverage building up, of course, as shown on your screen there, 8 p.m, Sarah Jane's special programme tonight. And if you've been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans 116 123 or visit samaritans.org.
Also, just want to pay tribute to Coventry as well. You know, Coventry, for letting us in there, in exactly the kind of openness that I think we should be welcoming in the health service, by the way. Just to reiterate, that special edition of the UK Tonight on the state of maternity care. Sarah Jane Mee has been in University Hospital Coventry this week and will present the show live from there. That's at 8 p.m. tonight.
If you would like to share your own story on it, do email us in maternitystories@sky.uk. We're going to turn to the Middle East now. And again, the ceasefire is being tested as the US military says it's launched self-defence strikes on Iran and have shot down ballistic missiles and drones fired at ships and countries in the Gulf.
So the US Central Command said strikes on Qasem Island on the Strait of Hormuz were a response to attempted attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait.
In Kuwait City, debris from an intercepted missile fell into a car park. The latest attacks come amid stalled ceasefire negotiations after talks on a deal to end their months-long war failed to advance over the weekend.
Well, we can talk now to our correspondent Sally Lockwood, who is in Abu Dhabi for us. Sally, just bring us up to speed with the latest.
Yeah, these events are beginning to look alarmingly routine for this region during this ceasefire. Kuwait has had a third round of incoming fire in the space of a week, and this time they've been hit. Reports this morning that Kuwait International Airport has been hit in this latest round of attacks from Iran, and it's resulted in the airport closing, suspending flights for an indefinite period of time, and it only reopened on the 1st of June after being badly hit in this war. And of course, this is after another exchange of fire around the Strait of Hormuz between the US and Iran. The Revolutionary Guard claimed that they managed to hit a US naval headquarters in Bahrain. US Central Command have come out and said that's absolutely not true. But certainly it seems this morning that Kuwait International Airport has been hit, causing significant disruption. Many Kuwaitis and people who are residents of Kuwait are still away travelling from the Eid holidays, and it's going to cause significant impact to many civilians living in Kuwait and the wider region. But there's also significant concern about the attacks that we've seen on nuclear sites in this war. We've seen attacks on the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran during the war, and then the Baraka nuclear power plant here in the UAE was hit around 2.5 weeks ago. The head of the nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, is currently in the UAE. He's inspected the site. He said to me the impact was considerable. A drone did manage to hit near one of the inner perimeter and set fire to an external generator. He said there was some significant impact, and he's over here monitoring the situation, and he's on his way to Riyadh today as well. He's doing a tour of the Gulf. But he sat down to speak to us about his concerns about nuclear sites being attacked in this war and how it's an international red line, and he really wants to send the message that this just cannot become normalised, and the fallout of this could be catastrophic.
Sally.
The Baraka nuclear power plant was hit here around 2.5 weeks ago, and you inspected the site yesterday. How much damage was there?
Well, it's considerable. It's considerable. This attack with a drone, quite a big one, I should say, impact an electrical facility which is close by to one of the reactors, Unit 3. I mean, as you know, there are 4 reactors there. So there was a hit, quite a big one, an explosion, and because of this, one of the lines was affected, and following the procedures in these cases, the unit was put and shut down, stopped.
We have seen these attacks take place during this war in Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran, Baraka here in the UAE. We've heard the threats from both sides about attacking critical energy infrastructure and power plants. Have we entered a dangerous moment in this war here in the Gulf where there could be one miscalculation which could lead to some sort of nuclear incident?
I would not disagree with that. We've seen how gradually this has gotten worse. At the beginning, what we saw was with the 12-day war, and then at the beginning of this new episode, there were threats. Then the Bushehr nuclear power plant was impacted, and then there was a lot of concern. And now this happens. So some people are asking themselves, well, what's next?
When you hear the threats coming from Washington, coming from Tehran, as head of the world's nuclear watchdog, you understand better than most what those consequences could be if those threats were followed through. What would be your message to the politicians in control of this war when you see these attacks on nuclear sites, which crosses an international red line? What would be your message to them?
Well, the message is that this benefits no one. No one. It's not only unconscionable, but it does not bring any military advantage. Radiological accidents are transboundary in nature.
And of course, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Absolutely, yes.
What are we talking?
Well, you know, in the case of a really radiological incident, we would be considering evacuations with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. And of course, socially speaking, you can imagine the impact, the panic, the socio-economical damage that would occur as a consequence of this. So we're not there, but we should take every measure, every step. We should, and this conversation is part of that. We should inform people of what the dangers that come associated with this are.
Sally Lockwood's interview there. Now, of course, we're talking a lot about maternity on the programme today, looking at our investigation into the rising number of women suffering injuries during childbirth that found a 25% rise in those experiencing a third or fourth degree tear in the last 5 years. And we're broadcasting from University Hospitals at Coventry today, where we can talk to Tracy Brigstock, Chief Nursing Officer. First of all, can I just say thank you for your openness and transparency in allowing us to see the incredible work that you guys do at Coventry, I'm sure, every day. Just talk us through why you think it's important for that kind of transparency to happen.
So, good morning to all of you viewers, and we're really pleased to host the programme from Coventry Hospital this morning. We provide a high range of services across Coventry and Warwickshire, and our maternity services cover complex patient needs as well as those more sort of simple routine. But we're really focused on personalisation and the quality of the patient care and services that we provide here at Coventry Hospital. I think what's really important is that we use the opportunity and extend the opportunity to work with our patients and service users and really listen to what matters to our local community and the service that they wish us to provide, and also receive feedback on how well we're doing as well, and really be transparent in that.
Yeah, I feel like the transparency is so important because, you know, you do hear that from people where things have gone wrong, that actually the way that the NHS deals with that in an open way is so important. And if it doesn't, then that's a problem. What do you think needs to change when it comes to maternity care? Because, look, we've got the data on mums having tears. We've got the data on the number of mums dying going up. From your own experience, what should change?
I think it's understanding the local population that you serve. Each area has its own demographics, its own makeup of different ethnicity mix. You'll know that Coventry is one of the most deprived areas in the country in terms of the postcodes that we serve. So it's really important you understand the local community and work with local MAMTA groups, the Maternity Voices Partnership and our local services, to really have a comprehensive service that isn't just about hospital care, but also one that takes patients and their families throughout the range of the services. So that's from pregnancy all the way through to post-pregnancy, and really understanding that, because each pregnancy is different, it's unique to the individual, and also it's really important that we don't take anything for granted in that, and we remain curious. I think also there's an opportunity to standardise how we learn together. I think that's critical in terms of the training and education we provide for our midwives and also our broader maternity services team,
So learning together builds that real strong bond and leadership to ensure that mistakes are less likely to happen, and actually providing real the opportunity to work together collaboratively, but also to be really curious of when things don't go so well. And to really interrogate those to get the most learning out of that. And that's what we owe to our families and our local communities.
We've had, I think it's fair to say, a bit of a, growing kind of roundabout of ministers in the Department for Health. We've got a new one coming in. Is that a problem? The political leadership. We've had all these reviews. We've got the Health Secretary changing every 5 minutes. Is that a problem?
I think that in the round and with experience, it's actually navigating that course throughout whichever political leadership is around us. It's really staying true to what matters on the ground. It's the relationships that you form with patients, families and carers, and also how you invest in the midwives that you employ. It's really vital that you don't get distracted by some of the noise or the constant change, but also each government and each change might bring a different lens that adds more value. So it shouldn't be discounted in terms of the value and worth that also brings to the actual maternity services going forward.
Just say thank you again for talking to us on mornings, but also thank you in the main for allowing Sky News access to Coventry University Hospital. I mean, it's exactly the kind of thing I believe that needs to happen more in the NHS, so we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Reminder, special programme coming tonight, 8 p.m. From Coventry Hospital with Sarah, Jane and Laura as well.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. Ahead of a long-awaited government decision on whether to ban social media for under-16s, research by USwitch shows parents are feeling pressured to give their children mobile phones. More than a quarter of parents admit they hand their children a smartphone because their classmates already have one.
Well, we talk now to the London 2012 gold medalist and father of three, Greg Rutherford. We'll probably try and squeeze in a few sports questions at the end, but this is a really important subject. Just talk us through why it is you decided to come out here and talk about it today.
Yeah, it's a massive thing. I think as a parent myself and somebody who's going through a situation now where my eldest boy, who's 11, is constantly badgering about having a phone. And I sit very much on the side of him not having a phone as of yet. Not saying that he never will, but not to have one at the moment due to the pressures and strains that can come with that. But it's also obviously the amount that the parents are feeling about it. And that's something that I think a lot of parents don't really fully understand the implications that can come with it. They feel a lot of stress of the potential issues that could come with having a phone too soon. And the actual need for it. I think there's a lot, we see it, especially kids, they love tech and want to be involved in things, and they try and pushing this need themselves, and actually probably getting them exposed to it too early, as we can see, can be a problem.
How often do you hear that excuse from your 11-year-old, or that quite legitimate argument, but all my mates have one?
Yeah, massive. That is a big part of it as well. And I've seen it firsthand, which has been really, really interesting for me. Over the last year or so, a lot of his friends have now got phones. But the negativity side of it that I've seen is them constantly looking at it, constantly being fixed to it. Might be out and about. I took one of his friends out last year, me, him, we went out and hung out with my son, of course, and we were out there, and the entire time he was staring at his phone. Then my son started watching his phone as well, and I'm trying to take him out for a day out, and they're completely consumed by that. And that's something where I think that can become the big issue. I appreciate for some that people think about safety and things like that, but I think for a lot of children too soon, it can be too much.
The thing that we always... The other argument which we always get is that this is parenting. Parents should be tougher. But I think it perhaps doesn't really understand, the pressures that you get if everyone else in your class has got one and everyone's on WhatsApp groups that your own child isn't on. But also, your child is influenced by their peers, right? So if you've got boys, for example, watching inappropriate stuff online, that influences the 13-year-old girls. Or if you've got girls who are continuing the, kind of... I'm trying to work out how to say this with a word I'm allowed on TV. The kind of slightly vindictive behaviour you sometimes get, bullying or whatever, after school, that impacts your child too, right? So it's kind of like a whole society thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that if they're exposed to things that they fully don't understand or that can cause issues for them, we can really cause problems for them. Going long-term as well. We don't want children glued to screens too much. We want them outside, want them active as much as possible. But I think as well, it's having the information as parents to actually give them the best opportunity, knowing the safety features. The smart screen tool that Uswitch have now added onto the website is something that means that parents can go in and actually see what they can do with the current phone the children already may have or they may be using for them, or things around their broadband, etc., where you can actually make sure that you have the right tools in place in order to make it as less dangerous as possible.
Would the simplest thing be for the government to ban either smartphones or, more likely in consideration, social media for under-16s?
I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Again, of course, I'm not across policy or anything like that, but it's something that, for me, my children won't be having access to social media or anything until they're significantly older. I think... probably because of the position I've been in at certain times, I've seen the very dark side of social media, as well as seen the great things that come with it as well, and it can be a brilliant tool. But I think that, from my opinion, for my children, there is absolutely no need for them to have access to it as it currently stands.
I was hoping to ask you just finally a sports-related question. Me and Wolf were talking before. We just remember...
Super Saturday was the high point of life. Not just sporting fandom. It was so epic.
It was amazing.
It was so epic.
And you getting that gold medal, it was just unbelievable. You kind of got the players from England, Scotland, at the World Cup later. What's your advice? Do you need to go for gold, believe that you can get gold, or win the World Cup? Or actually, is that pressure too much?
No, they'll all have that inherent belief. This is the big thing. No athlete in any sport goes anywhere to lose. Now, there is, obviously, it's points you can be realistic about certain things. If you're going into an Olympic Games, for example, and, I don't know, you're doing the long jump, you've never jumped anywhere near as close to anybody else, maybe that's less realistic. But fundamentally, they'll be going in with the mindset to win. We'll be the ones adding the pressure, but they will put way more pressure on themselves than any of us ever can. And that's a great coping mechanism. But the biggest piece of advice I give to anybody involved in any major sporting event, do not change anything now. All of the hard work has been done. Don't change, don't work any harder, don't try and add any new drills or new things. stick to what you know, stick to what got you to where you are, and that will see you through. Take us back to that moment. We were sort of saying the nation sort of peaked maybe at that. We're going to peak again, but it was sort of plateaued.
It was a high point.
But I guess it's not just the unbelievable glory of an Olympic gold medal. It was the moment, the stadium. I mean, it just must have been electric. Yeah, you're making me smile now. It's one of those, because it does take you back to some really special memories. And what I will sort of say to people as well, for everybody that was watching that, and we're very lucky at the Olympics, you get up to 1 billion people will watch the Olympic Games. I mean, that's an incredible thing to think about around the world. For me, though, I stood in the middle of that stadium looking out as all of the madness and everything that came with winning that gold medal was taking place. And I'm trying to process something which is the biggest moment of my life sportingly, and watching how everybody else reacted and feeling that. I mean, it's one of the most unbelievably special moments you could ever feel. I think a lot of people now as well, they say, do you miss it? I'm about to turn 40. My athletic days are very long behind me. I don't miss the idea of jumping into a sandpit anymore. I don't miss any of that. What I miss is walking into a stadium, people cheering for you, and that feeling when you've achieved that thing you've worked so incredibly hard for. It's a really, really special feeling. And the London Olympic Games will forever, for me, and I think for many, many athletes, be the crowning glory in their careers. Yeah. Well, thank you for delivering the glory for a nation. And that's you, Mo, Jessica. Oh, God, it was a good day.
It was a great day. It was a great day.
Anyway.
Any long jumpers in your family? Kids, or?
Possibly. My daughter, funny enough, now, she's only 5. It's all about keeping sport very, very fun for all of them. But she loves the jumping.
Oh, that's good.
So we'll see.
There you go.
20 years' time.
She has to keep her off the smartphone. If she's
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to switch back to a much more serious story now, of course, the top story of the day of the week. Certainly the tragic murder of the 18-year-old Henry Nowak, protests breaking out in Southampton last night, seeing 2 people arrested. Let's speak now to the MP Tan Desi, Chair of the Defence Select Committee as well. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Vikram Digwa, who murdered Henry Nowak with a dangerous 8-inch blade, you, like many other senior members of the Sikh community in Southampton and elsewhere, immediately and unrelentingly condemn him, like all murderers.
Well, definitely. I think, Wilf, first of all, I am deeply saddened and shocked by this brutal murder of Henry Nowak, and indeed my heartfelt sympathies and prayers are with the Nowak family. And many of us are aware that this life tragically taken away at such a young age when somebody had so much potential, and the Nowak family's grief was exacerbated by him being wrongly handcuffed by the police, who unfortunately had been taken in by the lies of Vikram Digwa and some of his family members. And that actually stripped from Henry the dignity in his final agonising moments. And that's something that should never be allowed to happen again. But I also want to place on record, Wilf, by yourself, my sincere gratitude and thanks to the Nowak family, in particular Mr. Nowak, for the dignity, the poise, the magnanimity that he showed when he made his statement, because many of us were listening intently to his every single word, because there had been too many people who were looking to divide communities. But how he said he didn't want this murder to lead to division or hatred or tension. And this wasn't about Sikhism, it's not about racism, it's about the murder committed by one violent individual. And that is why I'm extremely grateful on behalf of the Sikh community, many of my Slough constituents who are Sikh. Many of them fear not just shame because it's been committed by somebody of the Sikh community, somebody who's visibly Sikh as well. On top of that, they're going through shock, but the fear now for many of them, because of the calls from the likes of Reform, Restore and some of the other parties about banning the kirpan, the ceremonial Sikh dagger, which, by the way, wasn't even used in this brutal murder, but they're now fearful of their ability to freely and peacefully practice their faith. And I want to also say, via yourself, Wilf, that people need to be aware that the murder weapon was actually a pesh kabz, which is an Indo-Persian, highly deadly and dangerous weapon, which was used centuries ago in battles to pierce through body armour. And that's why Henry had no chance of survival, because it leads to significant internal bleeding. And it was used by somebody with an obsession with dangerous weapons. And as Mr. Nowak said, we need to tackle knife crime, something that many of us have been calling on for years.
I mean, hear for all your praise of Henry's family and his father in particular. Just, as I think everyone agrees, they've been unbelievable. As you said, the blade that the murderer of Ikram Dikwi used was not a kirpan. It was a big 8-inch dangerous knife. Sikhs can carry a kirpan. Just clarify for our viewers what that is, because there is some confusion between it.
Definitely. Well, look, for well over a century, Sikhs have been residing within Great Britain. Many of my family members, from grandparents to parents, they've been freely practicing their faith. They fought long and hard to get within British law exemptions for the turban, as well as the kirpan. The kirpan, by the way, is only worn by fully baptised Amritdhari Sikhs, those who actually commit to a disciplined way of life, spirituality, not just waking up early in the morning, to have a strong work ethic and much more besides. And that special exemption is there just for those articles of faith. It doesn't give a carte blanche to every single Tom, Dick and Harry out there to be carrying, the kirpan. And also, Wilf, you're aware how many instances for well over a century have there been of Sikhs incorrectly or dangerously using a kirpan? And also, as I had to point out to the chamber, because I'm fully aware of the pile-on and the attacks on the Sikh community on social media, which has led to a lot of fear within the community, where certain individuals and parties, like I said, Reform, Restore and the far right, actually scapegoating and throwing under the bus an entire community for the actions of one individual. And that's why we need to speak out, because wearing that the turban and the kirpan, that's what hundreds of thousands of Sikh soldiers who fought bravely alongside British troops during both World Wars, tens of thousands who made the ultimate sacrifices, wearing those same articles of faith for the freedom of this country. And that's why those people, rather than get into disinformation, they need to get a history lesson.
Can I just put all of the Sikh aspects aside? The type of knife, everything. Because, again, there's a lot of issues out there with this case. It's complicated and multifaceted. Can you understand the very deep, broad anger and the questions around it, which need to be further investigated, about whether or not there was some level of influence from police guidance on how to police certain things, and to the very fact that Henry was clearly treated as a perpetrator, not a victim, in that immediate moment when the police arrived? It's a completely different issue, but can you understand that, and therefore the broad anger that the nation feels?
100%, and many of us feel that same anger and angst at the actions of the police that night. But many, like I said, they'd been taken in by the lies of the murderer and some of his family members, claiming racism when we know that the person, rather than calling the ambulance, as he should have, after having used this long dagger, he called the police and then ended up spinning this yarn. And look, we're also aware that we need to make sure that the public debate, the discourse, is conducted in a sensible way, rather than individuals politicising people's pain. And we saw this after Southport as well. But what we do need to do is to make sure that the police is there to serve everybody equally. For the last 9 odd years that I've been serving as a Member of Parliament, there have been various instances where we've called out the police, whether it's racism against black people or brown people or white people, or processes not being correctly followed. So I think there's something there for the police to have a very deep introspection as to what happened here. But also, Wilf, it doesn't exclude somebody issuing death threats to our serving police officers. It doesn't permit violence against them, as some of what we've seen in Southampton. And that's just individuals who are using this tragedy for their own nefarious ends.
And as you're alluding to there, we need to wait for what the IOPC concludes as well with a lot of this. Can I ask, just to round this off, and I think it's been so enlightening to have your very clear and considered view on all of this. I sort of, on this question, just want to put aside anybody that might be trying to make a moment out of this and exaggerate things or misrepresent things. And in a country that so clearly is trying to clamp down on knife crime, all parties for 2 decades, including the Labour Party in government in recent years, can you understand some people's, I guess, confusion or dissatisfaction, or even, frankly, surprise at the fact that those laws can treat certain people differently?
Well, I completely understand people's surprise, but that also corroborates my previous fact that for well over a century, Sikhs have been carrying the kirpan. There haven't been instances. In fact, this was debated ad nauseum within Parliament. We had lots and lots of meetings under the previous Conservative government as well, when we had the passing of the Offensive Weapons Bill, which became an act. And all of these things were looked at. There are certain exemptions, but only for ceremonial purposes. I know that, for example, also our good Scottish people, that they carry, within the kilt.
That's it. And tradesmen can carry it for work.
Precisely. And there are various other exemptions that are there. They're very reasonable. It's had a very, very rigorous debate in Parliament. And that's why I'm at pains to say that what's happened here, and I want to reassure the wider British public, is not using the kirpan. It was using a very dangerous, deadly weapon for which there is no exemption for somebody to be carrying it in that manner and using it. And also, I'm glad that the justice system has meted justice to the murderer, that, he's got his life prison sentence. But I want to reassure everybody that, look, that the exemptions are only there for very limited circumstances, and I hope that people will not be misled by those, especially on social media, who are trying to divide our communities. We in Britain are very proud of our diverse communities, and many of us are patriotic. You know that. I've been interviewed by yourself on several occasions, constantly standing up for our brave servicemen and women, and we have an integrated community and society, and that's what we need to work towards.
Tan, thanks for joining us this morning. Very much appreciated. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live in St. Petersburg. Can Vladimir Putin continue to afford the war he's waging?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter. Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Hello again. We've been talking this week about the renewed attacks on Ukraine, on civilian targets by Russia. And Vladimir Putin has been warned he can't afford to sustain the war in Ukraine at the current pace. Top officials telling him to rein in defence spending. Inside Russia, hundreds of thousands of small businesses have closed since the start of the year as the costs of the war mount and the economy begins to falter. Our Russia correspondent, Ivor Bennett, looks at the impacts it's having on civilians.
Russia's economy is under pressure, and it shows. Closed cafes and shuttered shops are everywhere.
I'm in St. Petersburg on the main street, and all along here, you see signs like this one. It means to let, and it's evidence of yet another business that has gone bust.
Across Russia, more than 200,000 small and medium-sized businesses closed their doors in the first 3 months of this year alone, as the cost of war in Ukraine piles up. Anastasia used to have 3 flower shops, but recently had to shut one because of growing costs and wilting demand.
Неприятно, очень больно и обидно.
It's unpleasant, very painful and frustrating. Right now, there are no growth opportunities, no opportunities. I can't imagine any such opportunity at all, not a single one. Our utility bills have tripled just to add to the absurdities. Honestly, you have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur in 2026.
In beauty salons too, things are far from pretty. A rise in VAT to help fund Russia's war has increased tax bills by as much as 80 times, and many can't survive. The industry predicts a third of its businesses will fold by the end of the year.
I survived the 2008 crisis, 2014, the pandemic, the beginning of mobilisation, the beginning of the special military operation, and I can say that there's never been a crisis like this. This is the most difficult period for Russian entrepreneurs, the most difficult.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine had previously helped grow its economy. Massive military spending outweighed the impact of Western sanctions. But after more than 4 years, it's getting harder to afford. Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries are hitting the Kremlin's war chest, and the economy has begun to contract. The spike in oil prices due to war in the Middle East has given Moscow a boost, but experts warn it's not enough.
Russian economy is like a climber who's stuck above 8,000 meters. It is the altitude which mountaineers call the death zone. At this height, the human body cannot survive for long. It consumes itself faster than it can recover. And what we see with the war at the Gulf is that it provided Russian budget additional funding, additional oxygen, but it wasn't a game changer. So it's not brought this mountaineer from the death zone to the safe space.
And it's not just businesses seeking salvation. Consumers are too.
The prices for eggs, milk, meat, pasta, bread, everything has gone up.
Feels like it's been 10 to 15% over the past half a year.
Naturally, we'd like things to get cheaper. In general, as my grandmother used to say, I wish the war would end soon.
The government argues the slowdown is to be expected. and supposedly normal after a period of high growth. But there isn't much about Russia's economy that is normal anymore, and its problems are becoming difficult to ignore.
Iva joins us now live from St. Petersburg. Really fascinating, Iva. And St. Petersburg has seen some Ukrainian drone strikes as recently as today. I mean, to what extent is that not just hurting the local area, but hurting President Putin?
Well, there were plumes of thick black smoke above the city this morning, actually, after this overnight drone attack. Russia says it downed 50 drones across the region. Several flights were delayed and cancelled, and this morning Ukraine has said it hit an oil terminal here. As you say, this is not a great look for Vladimir Putin. It comes just hours before the opening of his annual economic forum here in the city. Hardly the backdrop he would have wanted for what is a flagship event, because it offers a very visible reminder of why Russia's economy is in trouble right now. The war, which is now in its 5th year, is draining Russia's resources. The official line, as I said in my report, is that this is cyclical, it's standard boom and bust stuff, but behind that official line, it seems there is growing concern over how much longer Russia can afford its invasion of Ukraine for. There were reports earlier this week in Bloomberg that senior officials have been warning Vladimir Putin recently that on its current course, the cost of war is unsustainable, and some more minor figures have started to voice that in public. All of this is in sharp focus here in St. Petersburg this week at this economic forum. Growth is the main theme, how to return to sustainable growth. But Ukraine is not mentioned once on the official programme. It does, of course, though, loom very, very large over the forum and over the country in general.
Iva, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. We're out of time for this hour of the programme. We'll be right back with all the day's top stories.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us.
Anger over the tragic death of Henry Nowak as demonstrators in Southampton clash with police.
There's growing scrutiny of the police and calls to review anti-racism guidance in the wake of his murder.
The US military launches strikes on Iran as Iranian ballistic missiles and drones are shot down over countries in the Gulf.
We've also got some special reporting coming up on maternity care. Sky News investigating the alarming rise in women suffering serious injuries in childbirth.
Plus, is London ready for self-driving cars? We talk to US company Waymo about their plan to launch in the capital within months.
Good morning. Thanks for choosing to be with us today. The tragic murder of 18-year-old Henry Nowak has captured the nation. The 18-year-old boy stabbed in Southampton and handcuffed as he lay dying. Questions are now being asked about a two-tier policing system.
Well, last night there were angry protests near to where Henry was killed. Police were pelted with bottles and bricks, and the Home Secretary condemned what she called the hijacking of a tragedy. Well, this morning the policing minister told us that 2 people were arrested.
So you can see the clashes between police and protesters happening. Their officers were repeatedly forced back from the line that they've been holding. More than 1,000 people took to the streets. The protests have been organised after the release of police body camera footage on Monday, which showed police handcuffing Henry in the moments before he died.
One of the issues at hand is the police anti-racism guidance, the action plan that officers follow. Well, this morning, police chiefs have said they're reviewing the language in it.
Just to read you the language, so this is what we're talking about. It says, producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups by responding to individuals and communities according to their specific needs, circumstances and experiences, with understanding that these will be racialised and with the aim of reducing harm. This is the key bit. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Well, I'll put that to Sarah Jones, the Policing and Crime Minister.
There was a wider piece of work called the Race Action Plan, which was put together under the previous government, which is about how do we train officers, how do we make sure everybody is mindful of the fact that there has been a history of racism in policing that we all know is well documented, and that needs to be addressed. This is quite a small sort of values document, sort of summary, and I think it's not written in the way that it should be, and it's right that it should be reviewed. But I think that shouldn't be taken to mean we need to rip up the whole system. Yeah. We don't, but I think this document is wrong.
Well, Ollie and Ali are both here to discuss this further with us. Ollie, first of all, just bring us up to speed on the scale of the protests overnight.
So yesterday we saw at about 5 p.m. protesters starting together outside of the Central Police Station in Southampton. At that point there was a few hundred people who were listening to speeches by Tommy Robinson, also known as Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and the activist. Previously, he was an actor, Lawrence Fox. Those speeches, peaceful, but then later on, the protests swelled to about 1,000, 1,500 people and started moving through the residential streets near to where Henry Nowak was stabbed to death. And it was at that point that we saw the ugly scenes that we're seeing now. Riot police officers with their shields out, being jostled. There was bricks that were thrown at them. At one point, a rubbish bin was thrown at some of the officers, and it was very difficult for them to hold that line, repeatedly being pushed back and back and back. We're hearing 2 people were arrested, one on suspicion of assault and one on suspicion of carrying an offensive weapon. The warning, there could be more arrests to come because police had their drones up, they're monitoring CCTV, and so they're going to be trawling through that footage to see if any more offences have been committed.
And look, I feel like when something happens like what happened to this 18-year-old boy on the way back from a night out, treated like he was a criminal as he lay dying, it sparks a political reaction too as well, doesn't it? And there are questions being asked about what needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this has now become deeply political, Sophie. And I think, you know, it's important, as we were saying the last hour, to kind of be clear in what we're talking about, because I think the important thing that we heard from the policing minister with you is she said that some of the wording in this guidance was wrong, the wording that you read out. That is this 6-page document that I'm holding up, but that is not this massive document, which is the police race action plan. It's a kind of add-on to that. So she's saying, you know, it's important to look at the wording, the nuance, without unravelling a plan that was a response to decades of racism in the police. And I think the challenge for the government is going to be how to balance that with all the nuances without this blowing into wider racial community conflict. And obviously, this feels like a really important moment. And I think we're seeing dividing lines in terms of the way parties are talking about two-tier policing. The Prime Minister said there's not two-tier policing. The Conservatives and Reform have said they are. There is. I'm going to read you a statement from the Home Secretary. She said there can be no justification for hijacking this tragedy to stir up violence and disorder. Those responsible can expect to face the full force of the law. I thank the police who have tonight, this was last night, shown great bravery and calm in the face of disgraceful violence directed at them.
I mean, that statement, I think, you know, she's making in relation to protests last night. And I think, Ollie, the wider issue, I think, that has caused so many questions from people across the country that I think will be at the heart of what the IOPC needs to investigate, and we need to wait for that investigation to finish, is whether that guidance is the central factor that led to Henry being treated so wrongly in that moment of dire need, and that will be what they're really looking into.
Yes, they're going to be looking at the way that the officers responded, the actions that they took, but also whether there's been this culture, if those words are taken verbatim and then relayed to officers, and officers believe, actually, we've got to take an allegation of racism or somebody from an ethnic minority being taken more seriously than other members of society because we've got this guidance from the National Police Chiefs Council. Also, there is this issue of that very emotive video. Now, the video showing Henry Nowak being arrested as he's telling police officers that he has been stabbed multiple times, that he can't breathe. Why wasn't he listened to? Why didn't the police carry out their checks? All of that will be investigated by the IOPC. The police watchdog is speaking to 4 of the officers who were involved in the arrests and the subsequent attempt to deliver CPR before Henry Nowak was pronounced dead at the scene. But we've learned that one of those police officers has since retired from the force.
Ollie, thanks so much for that. Ali, thanks too.
And now on Sky News, we're talking a lot about maternity care. Our teams are spending 2 days inside Coventry Hospital so they can talk to families and healthcare workers about their experiences. Now, this comes as an investigation by us has found that across England, there is a rising number of women suffering injuries in childbirth.
Sky News has analysed NHS data, finding a 25% rise in women who experienced a 3rd or 4th degree tear in the past 5 years. Our health correspondent Laura Bundock spoke to one mother who suffered a 3rd degree tear about the lasting impact the injury has had on her life. A warning, this report includes descriptions of injuries suffered during childbirth.
Sometimes when I remember the feeling, I will, like, a physical shudder comes over my body.
We first met Megan 36 weeks pregnant and preparing for her 2nd child. 3 years ago, she gave birth to her son, Roman. It was a low-risk pregnancy. That changed when she went into labour.
I can remember the feeling of the tear from my, from the start of the vagina all the way down to my perineum. And I remember the feeling of it actually ripping open and screaming. But the midwives didn't say anything. They didn't say stop, or they weren't coaching me.
Megan had suffered a 3rd degree tear. They usually require surgical repair and follow-up care to restore continence. It's still relatively rare in childbirth, but is becoming more common. Around 1 in 35 women, or 2.9%, who gave birth in England in the last year had a 3rd or 4th degree tear, compared with 1 in 43, or 2.3% in 2021. That's an increase of 25%.
When I got back from the hospital and realised what I needed to do, I self-referred to the physio to try and get my pelvic floor back intact, which eventually I did, but it took months, like up to 9 months, to feel physically back to normal. I feel like I missed out on the newborn stage with my son because I was so sad and so traumatised and in so much pain.
The Chief Midwifery Officer for NHS England, Kate Brintworth, has told Sky News the NHS is taking action to transform care for pregnant women and their babies, including introducing new clinical standards to reduce avoidable harm, targeted support for services that need to improve, and work to tackle unacceptable inequalities in care and outcomes.
This is actually somebody's life. This is going to change somebody's life forever. They're going to remember this day forever. So it would be really nice just to be treated like a human.
Laura Bundock, Sky News.
If you've been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans at any time, 116 123, 116 123, or you can visit samaritans.org.
And a reminder, we have a special programme tonight, 8 p.m, Sarah Jane Me, live from Coventry Hospital.
Well, let's turn to the Middle East now. And again, the ceasefire is being tested, to put it one way, as the US military says it has launched self-defence strikes on Iran. They've also shot down ballistic missiles and drones fired at ships and other countries in the Gulf.
US Central Command said strikes on Qasem Island in the Strait of Hormuz were a response to attempted attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. Let's bring in Sally, who's in Abu Dhabi, for us. Sally, I mean, again, it just highlights how far away we are from a reopening of the Strait, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for people in this region, these events, bearing in mind we're still in a period of ceasefire, they're beginning to look alarmingly routine. This is the third time that Kuwait has been attacked in a week, and Bahrain has also had incoming fire this morning. It follows another clash between the US and Iran around the Strait of Hormuz. Kuwait reporting incoming missiles and drones once again, the same in Bahrain. And the Revolutionary Guard came out and claimed that they'd managed to hit the US naval headquarters in Bahrain. Now, US Central Command came out and said that that's absolutely not true. No US sites were hit, that the missiles were either intercepted or didn't reach their targets. But in Kuwait, there has been a significant incident today. The international airport has been hit once again. It's not just caused damage, but also injuries, and it's now closed with operations suspended indefinitely. It only reopened fully 2 days ago after being hit so badly in the first 6 weeks of this war. But there's also growing concern in the region about nuclear safety. 2 nuclear power plants have been hit so far in this war, one in Iran and one here in the UAE around 2.5 weeks ago. Now, the chief of the nuclear watchdog has been here in the UAE inspecting the damage, which he's described as considerable. He said it was a considerable impact. And he sat down to speak with Sky News. He said to me that, you know, he's really concerned about a potential miscalculation in this war leading to a potential nuclear incident. But he also talked to me about the highly sensitive issue of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, which he says, I quote, is proving the thorniest issue when it comes to the current diplomacy between the US and Iran.
Do you currently have visibility of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile?
Well, not as much as we should have.
Do you know where it is?
Yes, we know. We know where it is. It is basically where it was in June last year. Only that, of course, this place was attacked. There is considerable physical damage. There may be an issue in terms of accessibility. It's in gas form, in cylinders, so very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to handle, potentially contaminating. So it is something that requires a lot of care.
Is it even possible to move it?
It is. No, it is possible. It is difficult. This is the whole point.
You were in Kazakhstan recently.
Yes.
Could they potentially take this enriched uranium?
President Tokayev has mentioned, you know, that in Kazakhstan we have a low enriched uranium bank, the IAEA, co-hosted with Kazakhstan. But other countries have manifested also their availability Russia, China has expressed an interest, France. I mean, there's no lack of goodwill to try to facilitate this, which is one of the thorniest issues in the negotiation that they are having.
When you hear the threats coming from Washington, coming from Tehran, as head of the world's nuclear watchdog, you understand better than most what those consequences could be if those threats were followed through. What would be your message to the politicians in control of this war when you see these attacks on nuclear sites, which crosses an international red line? What would be your message to them?
Well, the message is that this benefits no one. No one. It's not only unconscionable, but it does not bring any military advantage. Radiological accidents are transboundary in nature.
And of course, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Absolutely, yes.
What are we talking?
Well, you know, in the case of a really radiological incident, we would be considering evacuations with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. And of course, socially speaking, you can imagine the impact, the panic, the socio-economical damage that would occur as a consequence of this. So we're not there, but we should take every measure, every step. We should, and this conversation is part of that. We should inform people of what the dangers that come associated with this are.
And oil prices are up a little bit off the back of all of this to $98 now on Brent, up a couple of percent.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about driverless taxis. Could we see them all over the streets of London later this year and other cities to follow? We'll find out.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story? I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Yeah.
Welcome back. The US firm Waymo is launching its self-driving taxi service to the public in London later this year, in April. Its pilot service came under scrutiny after one of its cars veered into a crime scene.
Another company's chief product officer told our technology correspondent Roland Manthorpe there was a test driver in control at the time.
I saw that the local Green Party in one borough called for Waymo to be banned after a car kind of ran into a police cordon.
That was during a manual testing mission. So at the whole time, there was a test driver in control of the car. The autonomous system wasn't even engaged. And this points to the fact that even trained drivers sometimes, can make mistakes. And we've followed up with our testing driving provider to make sure that the right follow-ups are taken, training is up to the highest standards. But this was actually a case where it was manual the entire time.
Human error.
Yes, indeed.
Because what would you say to people worried about safety?
I would love for people to be genuinely worried about road safety. That's where our mission would align with everybody, because what's happening around the world with 1.2 million deaths from largely preventable road accidents is something none of us should accept. But what we have with Waymo now is empirical data that over 170 million miles, we are 13 times better at reducing serious injury.
So Waymo's coming to London. When is it coming?
It's coming this year. We've been testing. We also are happy to share with you that we've just started opening it up for our own employees to be able to hail a Waymo in London with a test driver for now, but that's a key moment. We do that in every city we launch. That's a great moment where we have already arrived in London today, and we are looking forward to launching later this year.
Really interesting. Of course, going to see a lot more self-driving cars in the months ahead in London, and more from Roland Manthorpe's interview there is available on the Sky News website. A couple of big interviews to come in the next few sections on the programme. We'll be speaking to Zia Yusuf. We'll also be speaking to the Belarusian opposition leader living in exile on her support for Ukraine's fight against Russia.
Hello again. We're going to return to our top story today, the murder of Henry Nowak and the questions that are now being asked after his death. I'm pleased to say that joining us now is Zia Youssef, who's a Reform UK Home Affairs spokesperson. Thank you so much for being with us. Look, I want to talk about Henry. He was handcuffed. He told police officers that he'd been stabbed, that he couldn't breathe. They didn't listen to him at the time. He then died, and his last words were his rights being read out to him. What lessons do you think need to be learned, and what needs to change?
Yeah, it's a tragedy. My heart goes out to Henry's family. But I think, having watched that footage, as distressing as it is, it's hard to escape the conclusion that it is a demonstrable example of structural two-tier policing that is embedded in, for example, Hampshire Police Force and forces across the country. And the reason I say that, people watching this can go to Hampshire Police's website and read their race action plan that was brought about under a Tory government. And you can read what that says, even if it was well-intentioned at the time. What it says, it demands that police officers, Hampshire police officers, must focus their attentions on offences against, quote, ethnic minority communities. And that is why when those officers attended the scene, the accusation of racism from the murderer and his brother was taken on its face with no burden of proof, was immediately taken seriously. And the accusation from poor Henry that he had been stabbed, which any reasonable person would agree is a far greater lethal, immediate potential threat to life, suddenly there was a burden of proof. And, you know, your account there of what happened was accurate and will move people, but you actually left out the fact that one of the things Henry heard having said, "I've been stabbed," was a member of Hampshire Police saying, quote, "I don't think you have, mate." So if we now live in a country where an accusation of racism is so powerful that you can stab somebody repeatedly and have your victim handcuffed by the police, then I think we need to ask ourselves how we arrived in this situation. And we need to be brave enough to call it out and say, everyone must be equal under the law, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion.
You say there that I left those words out. I will repeat those words. I don't want to leave that part of the story out. I just want to be super clear. You know, those were part of the words that Henry heard as he bled to death, right? You know, I acknowledge that, and I want to just talk about how serious the story is and how serious the reaction needs to be to it. Last night in Southampton, people were angry. You know, they took to the streets close to where Henry was stabbed. What's your message to protesters?
Well, look, people in the media have kept asking me why Nigel said that, you know, it was perfectly reasonable and right to be furious about this. And my response is, if you have watched that footage, there are many, many emotions that come about, one of which I think has to be anger. Now, the question is how you channel that anger. The way to channel that anger is to do what we can to bring about political change. You know, that's why we've already announced a policy that we would bring about in the first 100 days of a reform government. If Nigel's our Prime Minister and I'm our Home Secretary, then we will bring about the Equal Treatment Act that will abolish and ban things like those race action plans and remove the DEI programs from our police forces that, as I say, demonstrably create racism against white people so that everyone is treated equally under the law. And in terms of people protesting, look, I understand why people are angry. And as I said, it is important, whether you're at those protests or not, if you agree with what we're saying and believe that we should have a country and a police force and a justice system that treats everybody equally, then we should do everything we can to bring about the political change that's necessary.
You've spoken a bit about treating everyone equally, and I just wanted to touch on an attack ad that was put out by Reform about Kemi Badenoch. Before looking at the advert, I just want to read what Kemi Badenoch said. She said, "I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter. We all matter. Enough of this nonsense where we keep separating everybody." And then I'm just going to show you the attack ad that was put out by Reform. So you can see there, contrasting what she said in 2020, the bottom quote, "I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter." Do you accept that that is a misrepresentation of what she said, given just immediately before that quote, she said, "I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter"?
No, I don't. No, I don't, because everything in that ad are accurate words that she said. So then the next question is, to call it misrepresentative, then it would need to meet the standard that the things, that the message being communicated by those words, those truncated sentences, communicated something different to what she said at the time. And if you look at the context of 2020,
just to
after Black Lives Matter,
she literally said, I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter, I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter.
Important point. Post Black Lives Matter, Kemi equivocated in the sense that she said, so did not equivocate, meaning she was willing to say Black lives do matter. Post Henry Nowak's murder, she said, quote, she did not want to hear about White Lives Matter, nor about Black Lives Matter. Therefore, the point of the ad is that in one instance, Kemi Badenoch did not equivocate, and in the other, she did.
Okay,
and the
just
primary difference being the ethnicity of the victim, and therefore the ad is accurate, and we stand by it.
If I may, sorry, I know it's hard, you know, when we're not in the same room, but just to come in, if I may, what you say there is not what the attack ad says. You say there that she equivocates and she says two things in 2026, right, which I accept. That is not what that attack ad says. That attack ad misses out the words that you could have decided to put in there. That's my argument for why it feels like it is misrepresenting what she said.
Well, you can make that argument, but the point I'm making is that the only way you could argue that the attack was misrepresentative is if it fundamentally changed the meaning of the two different things that she said. And we were drawing a contrast between the equivocation that existed in one instance and the fact that she did not equivocate in the other. Therefore, the meaning is clear. We stand by it.
Can I just say, about an hour later after that attack ad, you, in response to a Telegraph headline saying that Nigel Farage said White Lives Matter, you put out this tweet, disgusting from the Telegraph. Nigel Farage said that white lives matter just as much as black lives. To shorten a sentence like that is journalistic malpractice and deliberately misleading. I mean, it sounds like it's exactly the same thing that you guys did.
No, it isn't, because, again, what the Telegraph were not drawing a distinction and contrasting two statements made by the same person in response to two different instances. Again, with respect, you've got to let me finish my answer, because you just made a pretty serious allegation against me, so please let me respond. What the ad that Reform Party put out with regards to Kemi Badenoch's response to the George Floyd killing and Henry Nowak's murder were that in one instance she equivocated, in the other instance she did not. What the Telegraph were not doing were drawing a distinction between Nigel Farage's response to those incidents. They simply left out the latter half of the sentence. And by the way, the BBC this morning, you can go and see, last night on Newsnight, Matt Shawley went out and claimed on 3 separate occasions, put to Kemi Badenoch the notion that Nigel Farage had called for people to respond to Henry Nowak's murder with, quote, cold white rage. Now, with white cold rage, the insertion of the word white, entirely fictional, right? So we have been on the receiving end of this relentlessly, but I want to reiterate, we stand by what we put in that ad because the meaning is crystal clear. Kemi's words after George Floyd, she was willing to say that black lives do matter, and post Henry Nowak's murder, she is unwilling to say that white lives matter. That is the point that we're making, and that is a perfectly valid point to make.
I guess the point that I want to make is I feel that you have articulated an anger that a lot of people feel right now, right? You know, over the death of this 18-year-old boy. People feel very viscerally. And you have received attacks from others that you were inflaming a situation and you're trying a political point score. This particular ad, you can see how it plays into the hands of people who are saying that of you by deliberately truncating what she said.
Well, there are bad faith actors who make accusations against us all of the time. And we're going to continue to say things that we believe to be true because we're not afraid of those attacks. And look, we should also put everything into context. What happened when Keir Starmer went onto the media? He somehow found himself attacking Nigel Farage, talking about the Henry Nowak murder body cam footage. Kemi Badenoch went out attacking Nigel Farage.
You're talking a lot about what other people are saying about you, and I guess I'm trying to say that I'm just trying to put back to what you're saying about other people.
The point being is that if you're putting to me that we're getting Reform UK is getting attacked, that's just any given day. We're used to that. But the point here is that we need to be crystal clear that the Henry Nowak murder was an example, an egregious example, a horrific example of structural anti-white racism and two-tier policing in this country. And we're going to keep making those points. And one of the reasons why it is perfectly legitimate to draw a contrast between, for example, Kemi Badenoch's reaction to the George Floyd killing and Henry Nowak's murder is precisely because, as I said, the DEI programs that have damaged this country so much in terms of our institutions were injected directly into the veins of our institutions by Tory governments over 14 years, including ones of which Kemi Badenoch was a part. And to be unwilling to, they haven't apologised for that. The Hampshire Race Action Plan was put into place under a Tory government. These are the sorts of things that need to be abolished immediately. So again, we have one law for everybody in this country.
Zia Youssef, thank you very much. Good to have you on the programme today.
Thank you.
We're now going to speak about the Russia-Ukraine war, but also the impact it's having on some key neighbouring countries. We're joined by the Belarusian opposition leader Svietlana Tsikhanouskaya, who's visiting London to promote democracy in her home country. The international community recognises her victory in the 2020 election, but President Alexander Lukashenko, of course a famous Putin ally, refused to step down. Throughout the war in Ukraine, she's been a staunch ally of President Zelensky in Ukraine, who last week reaffirmed his support for a free Belarus. And she joins us now in studio. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I guess my first question on this is whether or not you think, and you're obviously much more plugged into everything than we are, President Putin is on the back foot at the moment, or not?
Look, what I think for sure is that Ukraine is the only country in the world at the moment who dare to challenge Russia, who dare to attack Russia at the moment. You know, we see that Russia is not so powerful, is not so almighty that we got used to thinking about it, and now Ukraine is like showing that Russia can be in a vulnerable position. And of course, we are so grateful for all the countries that assist in Ukraine in their bravery. And we know that UK is one of the biggest supporters of President Zelensky and Ukrainian people. So, yeah, I just think that we need more bravery to show that the democratic world also have teeth, power and strength to attack back.
When you see, whether it's from the US, whether it's from the EU, or indeed in recent weeks the UK, easing of sanctions or not increasing sanctions as much as previously promised because of the Iran war and oil prices being high on Russia, how does that make you feel?
I think it's not time to stop with pressure on dictators. It's time to increase pressure, to keep dictators in isolation, because how dictators think. They suppose that new leaders will come to the democratic world, maybe with a new way of thinking, and they want to wait until changes, and they also trying to split the world, to see these narratives that maybe we have to talk to Russia, the war is too long. No, the discussion should be we have to help Ukraine to win this war. Point here, because Ukraine is fighting not only for their own lands, it's fighting for all of us, for the whole Europe. We have to always keep this in mind. So. Put pressure on the regimes as much as possible, because regimes usually they perceive this undecisiveness, as weakness, and they try and to beat even more harder if they feel like weak opponent.
Clearly, President Trump has spoken a lot to President Putin. There's been talk recently that the EU should appoint someone, send someone to start to talk directly to President Putin. Are you warning loud and clear against that? Because I guess you've got experience of this. President Macron recently had a phone call with President Lukashenko.
So first of all, Lukashenko is not the president. He's a person who seized power in 2020, and he's not recognized as legitimate president of Belarus. And actually, your words, mean a lot. So,
thank you for
that. And look, of course, there should be diplomatic channels, to communicate with the dictators, because there are many issues that have been discussed. But it shouldn't be political recognition. It shouldn't be like perception that it's improving of the relationship with the dictators. There should be specific conditions or demands on which these channels are working. For example, if we talk about Belarus, because our American partners also talking to dictator, some European working level diplomats also going to Belarus. The first point is demand, release political prisoners, stop repressions. But, dictators don't want to talk about people, about stopping the war. They want to talk about trade, about money, about some profit. But the democratic world has to be principled. No, first of all, people. First of all, stop terrorism in your countries, and then, just further discussion. But of course, diplomatic efforts and pressure can work perfectly in combination.
And just finally, tell us about the latest situation in your country. Is Lukashenko weak? Is he strong? What needs to happen next?
Lukashenko is very fragile, but I would prefer not to talk about Lukashenko, but about Belarusian people who, despite all the repressions, despite all the difficulties, despite the fact that Lukashenko dragged our country into the war and made Belarus country co-aggressor, we are fully on the side of the Ukrainian people. We are fully on the side of our European prospectus, for our country. So we are keeping strong, being in very difficult situation as a nation. We keep our unity. We have our friends all over the world, and we recently, our relationship with Ukraine also improved a lot. So we are in good position, and our task is not to let Lukashenko and other dictators to fool Europe again.
It's been really interesting discussing this all with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
While staying with Ukraine, we can talk now and bring in our security and defence analyst, Michael Clark. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen Ivor's report this morning about the economic hit to Russia. Do you think that is translating into pressure on Putin?
Yes, it is. He won't admit that, and he's going to the Petersburg Economic Forum today and tomorrow. He'll be, I'm sure, making a speech there. And it'll all be, rosy news saying everything's OK and the economy's doing well. But it isn't. Their growth is down to, on their estimates, is down to 0.5%. And at the beginning of the war, it was 3%, 3.5%, because war production suddenly boosted the economy. But the economy is now levelled out. They've got a major labour shortage. And, the thing is that he has resisted in all pressures. There were public protests against Putin in 2011. 2019, 2021, and he suppressed them all violently. And the 2011 ones were over constitutional issues, when he sort of seemed to be grabbing power. And then 2019, 2021 were over pensions. And that was more fundamentally important to him in a way. But he suppressed them all. And he's now got, tremendous control over the population. But undoubtedly, the economy is now flatlining. They've got major problems because war production isn't even going terribly well, because, again, all the factories are producing what they're producing, but they can't really develop them because the banking sector, which are all state-led, they do what the state tells them, and the banking sector have lent all of their money, as it were. Everything they've got to lend has gone into the armaments industry. So nobody else, the business people, can't raise cash because it's all literally gone into the war economy. So it is stuttering. It's not to say they can't carry on. They're doing quite well out of the Iran war because of easing of sanctions and the oil prices. That's taken a bit of pressure off. But in general, Putin is under pressure now. Yeah.
Obviously, Ivor was also reporting on some Ukrainian strikes towards the St. Petersburg area.
Oil terminal, yeah.
Oil terminal overnight. What do you think, both in this particular conflict moment in time and more broadly in historical conflicts, when you see those types of counterattacks on domestic, maybe not civilians, but civilian-related infrastructure, does it create a rally round the flag effect domestically in Russia, and we hate the people attacking us, we're pro-Putin, or does it reveal to the people that the true cost of this war?
It's a good point. It tends to be a sort of short and then medium-term effect. The short-term effect is rally around the flag. People are outraged by attacks from a foreign country, whatever the cause, whatever the reason. People are outraged by it. But then, in the medium term, after a year or 2 years, people get weary and they then say, we want this to stop. And the overall sense in Russia, insofar as you can gauge Russian public opinion, it hasn't turned against the war, but it's sceptical that the war is achieving anything. This war for Russia has now lasted quite a lot longer than the Second World War did for them. I mean, this is...
It's mad.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Exactly. I mean, the Second World War was the Great Patriotic War, and this war is now several months longer than that one, and it shows no sign of coming to an end from Russia's point of view. And that point is not lost. I mean, the Russian public may be cowed by their government, but they're not stupid. And so there is a sense that, of course, they want their boys to do well, and of course they're subjected to propaganda, but they are weary of the fact that the war has gone on for so long, as are the Ukrainians.
Can I switch and just ask about Iran? And... You know, defensive attacks is the phrasing we've heard of a lot of the salvos of the last, let's say, 2 weeks. I mean, when you see that, is it legitimate to frame it that way, or is the ceasefire over already? Or at least is it fair to say that the reopening of the Strait is a very long way away?
Yeah, I mean, the reopening of the Strait is still some way away. I mean, it could reopen tomorrow if both sides stood down their blockades, but that won't happen. You know, these American attacks are not really defensive. They can claim that they are in a broader sense, but they're not really. What they are is tit-for-tat attacks. The Iranians seem to want to show that they are still a potent force. And whereas President Trump has said, I'm still negotiating with the Iranians said, we're not negotiating. We haven't negotiated with you for the last 4 days. So the president is talking to somebody, but not to them, is what is their view. And as far as they're concerned, the competition still goes on, and they want to indicate that they're not being manoeuvred into a position that's not of their choosing. So they have launched some attacks, and the American attacks are not really defensive, they're responses. So there's sort of a tit-for-tat responses. Now, both sides are being, as it were, they're judging this, they're trying to calibrate it. But they are not letting any attack go unresponded to. I think that's the position. So it means that the ceasefire is very shaky, and it's shaky mainly in Lebanon. And the Iranians are really holding on to this position to say a ceasefire here in the Gulf is also got to be a ceasefire in Lebanon, and that's where it's most under pressure at the moment, on both sides.
Michael, as ever, thank you so much.
Good breaking news to bring you now. Emergency services at the scene after a crash involving a helicopter in a field at Southampton Down in Devon, and the MOD has confirmed it was a Royal Navy helicopter, believed to have come down the early hours of the morning in a field. It's near the A30, so near a pretty major road. We don't know if anyone was injured. We don't know the cause of the crash. Expecting to hear more from the MOD soon. I should say as well, there's a military training site, the Oakham Battle Camp in Devon, so kind of like near Dartmoor. So look, we're speculating here, but what we do know is that the Ministry of Defence confirming that this Royal Navy helicopter crashing into a field in Southampton Down in Devon.
Now, we're going to mention a different story altogether. A dolphin, a fox, a butterfly, a bumblebee. These are among some of the animals that could soon feature on our banknotes. The Bank of England wants people's views on which native wildlife should replace historical figures on the next series of banknotes. They've opened up this consultation. You can go on and vote. It comes sort of 6 months or so after the decision was made to remove people, famous Britons, from the back of the banknotes. On the front, you're still going to get a relevant British building and a member of the royal family. On the back, you would have had a Britain of great achievement, people like Jane Austen, I think Alan Turing, Winston Churchill currently on them, will be replaced by an animal.
So Winston Churchill subbed out for one of these guys.
And Jane Austen and Alan Turing. The thing that I've now read into more of this, so it's a survey, but the final decision will be made by Andrew Bailey.
I'm outraged by this as well.
Which is like, I love Andrew. You know, I'm probably the biggest fan of central bankers in all of Sky News, but come on. Where's his animal knowledge come from? Maybe he was a vet previously, but I think this is mad.
But also, they
have a poll and then don't go with it.
Also, they've told you who you can suggest, and then they might still overrule it.
By the way, and then went more into this for the original decision to remove the people was based on a survey, which I'd missed that it was based on a survey, and 60% of people voted to say we'd like to see wildlife going forward. I'm not sure that everyone voted that would have voted that cares about this issue.
Yeah. Who would you vote for?
I'm so outraged that we're taking off people. I don't care who the people are. I think it's ridiculous. I love animals. I'm just saying, what?
Well, you know, British wildlife, I think it's the anti-democratic thing that gets me. Why should Andrew... If the British people want a bumblebee, why should Andrew Bailey
I like a bumblebee.
be able to cut... Exactly, that's a good choice. What if Andrew Bailey hates bees? He may have been stung or something and then decides to overrule it and put in the fox instead.
Well, exactly.
Outrage.
I think it's kind of ridiculous, this whole process. And I don't think, in all fairness, the original poll was probably very... I mean, maybe it was representative. I didn't vote in it. I didn't know about it. I mean, by the way, Kelly Holmes, she should go. Greg Rutherford.
Yeah. Maybe we should go for Olympic athletes as well.
I mean, maybe we could get them to dress up as animals and sneak them in.
This is going in a whole new way now.
It is going in a whole new way. I think it is I know that 6 months ago, the original decision.
Well, there you go.
As you can tell.
Vote for your own animal. They might
ignore you.
They might ignore you, so you can give it a go anyway.
Don't bother.
Now, look, a serious story next, because we've been talking a lot about maternity care on this programme this morning. Our teams are spending 2 days inside Coventry Hospital talking to families and healthcare workers there.
The Sky News investigation has found a rising number of women across England are suffering serious injuries in childbirth. Our lead presenter, Sarah J. Mee, will be live from the hospital, 8 p.m. this evening, for a special UK Tonight, and joins us now there. And SJ, there is so much I know you're going to be tackling in the programme tonight and the day ahead, which we really are looking forward to. And it is, as Sophie's been saying as well throughout the programme, really unique to have the access you have there at the hospital. Kind of kudos to them as well.
Yeah, University Coventry Hospital have opened their doors to us today, which is pretty rare in the NHS, and that's because this is a trust, this is a maternity unit that's getting maternity care right. It hasn't always been the case, but in the last few years it has come to be regarded as one of the best outfits in the country, and they've opened our doors to us to show us what they're doing, because the key question is, how did they turn their unit around? How are they getting things right? Because as we've covered here on Sky News, for mums and babies, it really is the luck of the draw as to the standard of care you get in this country when it comes to securing a safe birth and having a healthy baby. Now, we know that the maternity sector is in crisis. We talk about that a lot here on Sky News, and we have 2 key reports coming out later this month, one at national level and one to do with the Nottinghamshire Trust. That will lay bare the extent of the problem in this country, and it will give recommendations of how to improve it, because while on paper things are getting better, more money in the system, more midwives, fewer babies actually being born, on wards up and down the country, that isn't translating. As you've reflected this morning, the number of women experiencing tears is on the rise. The UK has a higher maternal mortality rate than in Europe, and 1 in 4 women say they have had a negative birth experience on the NHS. It's a national shame. As I said, University Coventry Hospital are getting it right. We'll be asking key questions of the midwives here, the women that hold it all together on this ward, and we'll be talking to parents as well. I had the privilege yesterday of being in an operating theatre for a C-section to see a baby being born. They average around 15 births a day here on this maternity ward. 4 already have been born this morning since you guys have been on air. And so I'll be hoping to meet some of those babies, talk to the midwives, get a sense of what they're doing here to keep mums and babies safe and, of course, to provide the best possible care. So I'll be talking to various presenters throughout the day here on Sky News as we follow the journey of what goes on here throughout the day, and we'll have that special programme tonight at 8 o'clock, which I hope you can join us for.
Oh, Esther, can't wait. And there's something about watching a baby being... I remember I wanted to feature in Nepal, and this tiny, like, outcrop in the mountains and I saw a baby being born, and I'm not joking, in my 25 years as a journalist, it was the best moment ever. It was amazing. And I guess that's it, isn't it? Like, we talk rightly about all the when it goes wrong and how we need to change things, but it is the most incredible miracle at the end of the day as well, right?
Yeah, having a baby is a life-changing event, and so often we talk about, how it can be life-changing for so many terrible reasons, but in the main, healthy babies are born here in the UK, 1,500 every day born in the UK safely. And look, I've got goosebumps just thinking about witnessing that C-section yesterday. I was on the other side of the curtain 6 years ago, and, I got to see it from a detached point of view, and you know, when it goes well, it is a beautiful experience. Mother and baby are doing well. They're on this ward where I haven't checked in with them yet, but I will do today. But a gorgeous little girl was born. The surgeon was an absolute rock star. There were so many people in that operating theatre. I don't think that's what I quite appreciated. There were around 15 people in that operating theatre, all with a clear job to do, all very calm. Vivaldi was playing. It really was a privilege to be there, and you can see some of that on the show tonight at 8 o'clock. And I'm hoping to catch up with Luciana again, the mum, and her partner Pedro, and their little baby Clara. So I'm really looking forward to catching up with them and seeing how they're getting on today.
Can I just say, I've only ever witnessed one baby being born. Undoubtedly the most joyous moment of my life. And can I just give a shout out?
Of course.
All the women. It was very easy for me to witness that, but to all the women out there, I mean, you guys are absolute stars.
Oh, but as we've been saying,
to all of the people
and dads have a key part to play in this as well. You know, talking about maternity care and why it needs to improve. It's important that dads and partners are talking about this as well.
Yeah. I just want to end as well. We had an email in from a woman called Jean talking about your coverage, and she was talking about her own traumatic birth, but she said, thank you from all of us who in those days were not informed and not allowed to speak. And I think that's a good place to end it, that the conversation is important, talking about this is important. Thank you for all the work you've done, SJ, as well, and we're very excited to watch your programme at 8 p.m. Thank you, SJ.
Thanks, Sophie. Thank you.
To you both. We are out of time, but much more on all the day's top stories after this short break with Gareth.